of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Wednesday, December 2nd, 2020. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Deputy Director at the Quincy Institute, historian Stephen Wertheim, on Biden's foreign policy choices for the future. Meanwhile, Bill Barr abandons the good ship SS Republican delusion, but not after laying a booby trap for Joe Biden. COVID deaths topped 2,500 in the U.S. yesterday as states desperately search for medical workers. Meanwhile, Trump contemplating preemptive pardons for his children and his favorite lawyer. And apparently, the DOJ was investigating a possible bribery for pardon scheme. UK authorizes a COVID vaccine, and Trump is grumpy because he doesn't understand the second mover advantage. McConnell fighting a COVID relief compromise as a new report shows how skewed the Paycheck Protection Program was in favor of large corporations. Trump threatens the defense authorization signing unless Congress repeals Section 230 protection for internet platforms. And your chocolate is about to get a lot more bitter. It's Nestle and Cargill, accused in the Supreme Court of the United States of aiding and abetting child slave labor, trying to wriggle out of it. And remember those attacks on Ilhan Omar's AIPAC comments? Barack Obama says nearly the same thing in his book, and crickets. Lastly, young Republicans plan their indoor gala, New York City, featuring Sarah Palin this week. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We got a lot to talk about. Joining me today, as almost every day these days, Emma Vigeland. Emma, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well today. I thought of a nickname for Rudy Giuliani while you were like a Trump nickname if he was on the other side. I think you'd call him Sweaty Giuliani.
Sweaty Giuliani.
Right?
Sweaty Rudy.
That's all I can say.
Sweaty Rudy, folks. Sweaty Rudy. Rudy's so very sweaty.
Dripping down his face, looking disgusting.
In this instance, he's offering him a preemptive pardon, perhaps, at least contemplating it, and for his kids. No word about Tiffany or Barron. I think it's just the ones that have been in close proximity to him, which is not to say that Tiffany or Barron have not been in close proximity, although I think there's reason to believe that they have not been in close proximity.
Certainly less frequently.
Yeah, without doubt. And Rudy Giuliani obviously is being investigated by New York state officials and perhaps the Southern District of New York. We will get to more of that later. There's a lot of news to talk about, not the least of which Bill Barr announcing yesterday that there is not only has the DOJ found no evidence of any voter fraud, nor has, according to him, the Department of Homeland Security, which, of course, we know that at least one official was fired for coming out and saying at least the area in which he dealt with, cybersecurity, there was no evidence of any type of interference from outside governments. Bill Barr did, however, appoint Durham, the prosecutor who he had assigned back in 2019. It's sort of amazing when you think about it, how long. In fact, Marcy Wheeler did the numbers. The investigation into the investigators, as they would call it back in the day, has actually required more personnel days, has been longer than the actual investigation into Donald Trump.
What did she say, 70% longer?
So, yeah, something almost like 2/3 longer, 66%, something to that effect. And it's ongoing. And Bill Barr has officially made Durham a special prosecutor. People are sort of baffled by this. It's unclear exactly why, but it's presumably to give him more independence and make it harder for whoever Joe Biden's attorney general is to end the investigation. Now, remember, there was a lot of pressure on Durham, apparently, to come up with a result before the election. Donald Trump was very upset about that. He's still talking about how he's upset about there was no interim report released. We should also remind you that Durham's longtime lieutenant, when he is the U.S. attorney in Connecticut, his longtime lieutenant, a woman who had worked with him, I think, for over a decade, resigned sometime in the fall, if I recall correctly, because she felt there was so much pressure.
Right. And these are all of those conspiracy theories about the FBI agents texting about Flynn and all of that. And the reason that Barr is doing this, even as he goes against Trump's wishes on the election, is that he's affording the privileges to Durham or Dunham. Which one is it?
Durham.
That,
did I say Dunham? Sorry.
I don't know. I can't keep track. That basically Robert Mueller had. So you get one special counsel, you get another. I mean, we're going to keep going back and forth on this if it's this politicized going forward.
Well, it's being analyzed as a sop to Donald Trump, but I also just think that Bill Barr is a movement conservative. He is a movement Republican, as it were, and anything they can do to obstruct and harm a Biden administration, they will do. This is the era that we're living in. Frankly, I would argue that in terms of what Republicans have been doing, this is an era we've been in for at least 20 years.
Yep. Probably
closer to 25. It is only Donald Trump that I think has made it quite clear to the conventional wisdom, as it were. It does feel like the Democratic leadership still has not picked up on this, but we will see. I keep hoping that the platitudes of like, we can get along, we're going to unify the country, are simply platitudes. But there, the idea that this is possible with this Republican Party is beyond absurd. It's dangerous, and we have seen its danger. We saw it, in things like Barack Obama attempting to do a grand bargain and cut Social Security. We saw it in the context of Merrick Garland, who was simply a poor pick based upon the politics and the reality of whether Mitch McConnell was going to give any of Obama's nominees a hearing. I mean, we could go on and on and on.
We're seeing it now. Right now, McConnell is rejecting this bipartisan stimulus bill, which has the liability shield that he wants, and saying that he's not going to consider it. And it doesn't have stimulus checks. It just has $300 of unemployment as opposed to $600, which the Democrats initially wanting, which people have been getting. So it's already a conservative bill, and he's already rejecting it.
Well, yes. I mean, he's just not interested in that at all. And we will talk more in the coming days about what's happening in the House and the reporting that I'm seeing that Nancy Pelosi may be looking for an actual budget bill as opposed to a continuing resolution. Quickly, a continuing resolution essentially is a punt. It says we will keep all the funding at this level and we will deal with it in 2 or 3 months, but we've got a deadline coming up, and that is December 11th, where the government will shut down unless there's a continuing resolution or a new budget bill. And the idea that you would pursue a new budget bill is leaving a lot of people scratching their heads, because a continuing resolution gets you into January, deep into January, where you have an incoming Democratic president and the possibility, maybe unlikely, but the possibility of a democratically controlled Senate. And there may be one bite at the apple to do anything, and that is all going to be done through reconciliation. So if you lock yourself into a budget deal with Mitch McConnell now, while the Republicans have power, it is necessarily going to be less than what you want in terms of your priorities, one that you might be able to pass in January when you have a Democratic Senate. If you don't get that Democratic Senate, you still have a Democratic president, and you're simply in the same position you are now, except either way, the Republicans are going to have a little bit less of a margin in the Senate. So it is bewildering, and it is consistent with what we've seen with House leadership, which is we're not going to do anything proactive. We're not going to legislate. We're not going to attempt to exercise any leverage when we can get it. Remember, you talked about this bill, this compromise bill by the Gang of Four or Gang of Eight. We haven't quite established who.
Gang of attention seekers.
Indeed. But they have only $160 billion for states and cities. Go back to April, after the second tranche of the PPP was passed. Nancy Pelosi attacking critics who said, hey, you just gave away all your leverage. How are you going to get money for states and cities? She said, don't worry, we will get it. That was 8 months ago. And we're not getting it. And they need it bad. But we got to take a break and talk a little bit about our sponsors today. And then when we return, we will be talking to Stephen Wertheim. This is great. This is, I don't know if you're aware of Blinkist, Emma, but...
I've heard of it, yes.
Okay. I am sure if you're like me, because I know you're busy, there's books out there, maybe even podcasts. You're like, I'm sort of interested in it, but I'm not prepared to sit down and read the whole thing. Well, Blinkist is for anyone who cares about learning but doesn't have a lot of time. It takes the key ideas and insights from over 4,000 nonfiction bestsellers in over 27 categories. It gathers them together in 15-minute text or audio explainers. They call them blinks.
Wow.
Yes. You use blinks, you get into a topic quickly. And Blinkist at this point has even teamed up with popular podcast creators. Still waiting for a phone call. To blink those for you too, so you can get to the heart of a podcast episode fast. 15 million people are already using Blinkist to broaden their knowledge in 27 nonfiction categories like self-improvement, management, mindfulness, more. For me, I use it. There's two things. One, I want to learn to get along with people better, and so I read the books about how to be more, charming, or how to, make friends.
I think
but I'm
you're
not going to read the
perfectly
pros.
charming already. Maybe it's because of Blinkist.
Maybe part of it, and so. But I don't want to read all the in between stuff. Like I don't want to hear the anecdotes about, Bill was
straight
always
shot
thought,
to the vein.
I just
of knowledge, right.
Exactly. I just want the key takeaways. I did that with the Tim Ferriss books. I know I always talk about that, but the 80-20 stuff. I mean, that's where I learned like some of these like basic principles. Because I'm not a business person. I don't know if you've picked up on that, but you can you can dive into these type of books, and then there are books like where I feel like I should know about that book, but I don't really want to read it. So Blowout by Rachel Maddow. Like I felt like I should. That's a book I should probably be aware of, but I don't know if I got the time to read the whole thing. So 15 minutes, I can do that.
Boom.
Exactly. Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. That made me upset a little bit because I don't sleep, but I wanted to get to it quick. Boom. Right now, Blinkist has a special offer just for our listeners. Go to Blinkist.com/Majority Report. You start your 7-day free trial. You get 25% off a Blinkist premium membership. So you go to Blinkist, Blinkist, Blinkist.com/Majority Report. You get 25% off and a 7-day free trial, Blinkist.com/Majority Report. And this I am loving because I have made the determination that I was going to like buy clothing. I'm going to go outside and I'm going to try and socialize outside. I've been reading about this, how like the Nordic countries do during coronavirus. Right. Well,
my people.
Are those your people? Well, then you probably already know this.
Norwegian.
Wool. Yeah. Right? That's the key.
There you go.
Well, backcountry.com is the place to go if you want to be outside this winter.
Nice.
When you shop at backcountry.com, you can pick up the phone, you talk gear with an actual former Olympian. I don't know if you know about this. Well, first of all, it was founded by a former Olympic skier. Backcountry.com is the best place for outdoor gear and apparel. They have Patagonia, they have Yeti, they have Santa Cruz bicycles. Backcountry.com has thousands of your favorite brands and products for every outdoor adventure. It's nuts. I have gone down a wormhole on their site. Yes. Well, I don't know if you know this, but I board and I'm teaching my kids to board. So I bought Saul for Hanukkah. Hopefully he's not listening to the show. He probably is not. A hover cover.
For his board?
Yeah. Do you know what that is?
No, I don't, because I snowboarded a little. I mostly ski, though.
It's some type of like neoprene-ish type of cover you put on the board so he can practice indoors.
That's so cool.
And he's going to love it. And then I got myself some, I can't even pronounce this, Fajal Roven long johns. They're obviously like
keep you warm.
Yes,
nice.
They're long johns. They're wool. I got some knee pads because I'm an old guy and I worry about when I fall when I'm boarding. They had some Sam Hill knee pads, and now I'm in the middle of trying to figure out which vest I'm going to get because people know I'm a vest guy.
Do they have those wrist guards? I bet they do.
They have the wrist guards.
Snowboarding, so
yes,
that's why I stopped.
I get it with the internal gloves too. No, they have padded for your butts. They have everything, everything you could ever imagine. And they've got about 9 million versions of a vest that I'm looking at. Not like a sweater vest, but it really is awesome. And it's like one of those places you would love to go and walk through. And obviously right now I'm not as interested in doing that, but it's like a virtual one. Cool. Go to backcountry.com/majority, enter the promo code majority to get 15% off your first full price purchase. Some exclusions apply. Go right now, get 15% off at backcountry.com/majority. Enter the promo code majority, backcountry.com/majority. Don't forget to enter the code majority, folks. All right, I'd like to welcome to the show, returning to the show. We had him on actually fairly recently, Stephen Wertheim. He is a historian and the deputy director of the Quincy Institute. Stephen, welcome.
Hey, good to be back.
I'm still reeling from our talk about your book about the UN, and it has really, honestly, it's been something I've been thinking about quite a bit in terms of the implications of the UN in the world and our role in it. And you have written a piece with Benjamin Friedman. Say No Joe in Foreign Policy, and it is basically arguing that we should not be going back to the status quo. I want to talk to you about some of his appointments so far and who you anticipate may be future appointments in this field. But let's start with what Joe Biden, what he ran on, and then let's go from there.
Right. So on the one hand, Biden ran on something like a restoration. I mean, at times his rhetoric could get almost explicitly conservative in the sense of let's go back to the status quo before Trump. He had a piece in Foreign Affairs magazine that came out toward the beginning of this year, where implicitly he grouped all presidents prior to Trump since 1945. So that would include George W. Bush,
right,
as upholders of the liberal international order, U.S. leadership, etc. So there's been that element. And you see that element just in the past several days when he's saying America's back. And he's saying that to heads of state, heads of government around the world. On the other hand, I think we need to distinguish Joe Biden from candidates like Hillary Clinton, true believers in U.S. military intervention. I don't think Joe Biden is quite the same, right? Both of those figures have been firmly within the mainstream. Joe Biden has always been there himself. And of course, he supported the Iraq war and, to my mind, has never given a great explanation about why he did that, what he learned from it, et cetera. But he at least seems to understand where America is in the world right now and what Democratic voters and just voters in general, the American people, are thinking about their foreign policy. So since the war on terror started to go obviously haywire, he has been more cautious from within the mainstream about U.S. military operations, including opposing the surge in Afghanistan from within the Obama administration, a lonely voice taking that point of view. And so he did in the campaign talk about bringing an end to the forever war. He did promise to essentially break from the late Obama policy of supporting the Saudi-led coalition in its war in Yemen. Said he would end U.S. support, even called Saudi Arabia a pariah on the Democratic debate stage. So he's not where I'd like him to be exactly on a whole range of issues, but I think it gives us something to work with.
Okay, so it's interesting the pieces say no, Joe, because there is a quality of like, we need to maybe strip down some stuff, as it were, before we build up and become proactive in some way in the way that we engage the world. And we seem to have, if I understand you correctly, there's two sort of constructions here. One is America's place in the world in terms of, like you say, the liberal establishment order, which was, and it's arguable, I think, as to when this started to really genuinely erode. I would argue that it did earlier than I think a lot of people are suggesting, but which had basically U.S. hegemony in one form or another around the world. I mean, we have 800, approximately, maybe 750 bases around the world, at least since the fall of the Soviet Union. We have perceived ourselves, if not others, having perceived us as a hyperpower. So that's, and then that's one sort of, I guess, rubric. And then the other is how much the military and intervention you use to maintain that status. Let's take the first one first, because it seems to me that, and to be fair, this was my assessment 4 years ago. It has not changed. That if I'm other countries in the world and I'm looking at America, like, to me, Sam Seder, I'm looking at America maybe, and I'm saying, because, I'm a doe-eyed optimist saying, like, Donald Trump is just, an anomaly. It's just a once-off fluke, and that's it. And we're gonna fix everything. We're not gonna go back to that. But if I'm from a different country, I'm looking at this and I'm going, like, if they can go from Barack Obama to Donald Trump, why would a rational person like me from a different country think that they can't go to, Donald Trump Jr. after Joe Biden? I mean, we're an unstable country. Yeah. And there, it's like all you need to do. I don't know. I just remember like one anecdote where someone said, like, they were waiting on someone to pick them up and they didn't show after 10 minutes. And the people showed, they said, why'd you leave after 10 minutes? It's like, well, once you didn't show up at the time that you said you were going to, like, all bets are off as far as I'm concerned. And aren't we in that type of situation?
Why do we think Donald Trump is as bad as it can get? I mean, this is a failure of imagination.
In 2024, that could be a real life fascist if he was able to get past the Republican primary.
But the point being is that we're swinging between, like, the American public has basically said, we're not interested in that type of continuity that other people might be looking to us for.
That's right. And then if we go back before Obama, you have George W. Bush. Okay. So I do think that many other people around the world, other countries around the world, have a longer memory than some people who seem to have an interest in having a short memory in the town behind me, Washington. And so I think, we can say America's back and so forth, but it's going to be about results. It's going to be about, can the United States actually get a hold of its own conduct at home and abroad? That's the thing that will matter most, I think, both in the next 4 years and over the long term. And you've hit on such a crucial question. And this one is something that I'm hoping that the people around Biden are concerned with and capable of taking seriously. How comfortable are we? I mean, let's imagine that, the Biden team can implement as intelligent and nuanced an American foreign policy as it would like in the next 4 years, maybe in the next 8 years. What does it then mean to hand over the world's largest coercive apparatus to the next Donald Trump or worse? I mean, it didn't go that well under more responsible presidents.
Right.
Well, just then I have a question then when you say, looking forward, where we go from here. You mentioned ending the genocide in Yemen and the Saudi-led coalition there that the United States is funding. And obviously Biden has signaled that he wants to re-enter the Iran nuclear deal, even though there's been immense damage done in the past week with Israel killing their top scientists. So what do you foresee the Iran deal being able to be successfully re-implemented? And then also, what hope is there for other similarly positive coalition building moves by the Biden camp?
The president-elect came out with some nice statements just this morning in the New York Times in conversation with Tom Friedman, of all people, saying essentially that he wanted to have a clean re-entry into the JCPOA, the nuclear deal with Iran. In other words, he seemed to be resisting the impulse to use Trump's completely inappropriate sanctions and punishment of Iran for complying with the deal as leverage to try to get a quote unquote better deal. So that's very positive. Let's hope he does that. But it's going to be difficult. As you mentioned, the damage, some damage has been done quite a bit, and we don't know what will happen between now and Biden's inauguration. And so whether Iran is at this point willing to come back into compliance, given that Biden himself for 4 years, for 8 years may be willing, but what's happened has happened, and what may be happening in the future has to be taken into consideration. That's an open question. What I hope the Biden camp will realize is that the old nuclear deal was living on borrowed time in our own political system. And so we've actually got to go bigger, bolder, if we're going to achieve the result that some were hoping for. I mean, we don't just need to have a nuclear agreement with Iran. We need to systematically pursue a policy of disentangling the United States from the political and military conflicts in the region. Doesn't suit our interest. Sure hasn't worked out very well for people across the Middle East, even if it works out well for certain governments which are unsavory and poorly for other governments which are unsavory. And so to take the Iran issue, step one, in my view, is re-entering the JCPOA, that we should be heading toward a course of normalizing relations with Iran, in addition to undoing our over-identification of our own interests with another set of pretty bad actors in the region, Saudi Arabia, whom Biden called a pariah, UAE, Egypt, Israel.
All right, I want to circle back to that because those are one of the 5 points in your piece. But I just want to stay on that broader question for a moment, which is, if we cannot, I mean, and I guess this is the question I have. If the perception of us as an unstable partner long term is accurate in terms of these, from the perspective of the world, broadly speaking, right? I mean, both, regardless of whether we perceive them as allies or competitors or whatever, just, there was a consistency to American foreign policy, for better or for worse. I would argue in some instances, maybe a little bit worse, but nevertheless, there was this notion of we project our power, we're the hyperpower, we have this hegemony. Is there a sense, is there an ability to reckon with that within the Biden administration, which says like, hey, you know what? Maybe we're not going to be the hyperpower. Maybe it is in our best interest to simply be, one of four, one of five, or, that, because it seems to me that we're still living under the Project for a New American Century idea of we keep these low level conflicts going on around the world and keep everybody busy so nobody can amass enough power to compete with us. And that seems to be over. Like, what is the new project for this century? And is it maybe not going to be an American one?
I think that the senior advisors around Biden recognize that the so-called unipolar moment that the United States enjoyed at the end of the 1990s was just that. It's a moment and it's past. And actually, the Trump administration has recognized the same thing in its national security strategy. The problem is that, this could lead you in broadly one of two directions. You can say, okay, the United States, didn't even play its incredibly favorably hand well in the most propitious circumstances imaginable. Why should we think it's going to get better going forward? Let's recalculate what threats we face, what our interests are, and judiciously pull back our military force around the world. That's basically what I'm for. But what the Trump administration, the Pentagon in particular, has done is say, oh, this is a problem, and now we need to get tougher. Now that we face a world with great power competitors, near peer competitors, Russia and China, we didn't expect them to rise, and now they're, doing bad things. And so now we've got to focus on them, even as we continue to not be able to wind down our own wars in the Middle East and elsewhere. And, I think that there's actually mainstream bipartisan agreement on that score, and that's troubling. And so I worry that some of the senior people around Biden basically are going to continue this notion of great power competition to orient the United States, which can provide an argument for getting out of the Middle East in order to focus on China in particular. But I think that's an attempt to cling to as much military dominance as possible in conditions that have obviously changed internationally and domestically. I don't think that would be sufficient to bring about the change that we need.
That's basically the first point of five that you make in the foreign policy piece, which is the Biden administration should not pursue global military dominance. And where, I don't know if that's so. Let's move on to point two, because I want to maybe circle back into that, because the question of China and relative, what global military dominance means in an era where China is at least perceived to be ascendant. You say the second thing is the Biden administration must deliver on its promise to end the forever wars. You touched on that. That's Afghanistan. Where else do we need to pull back? Afghanistan, we have now, it's interesting. Trump tried to take off the table, half our forces there, which would be about 2,500, if I'm not mistaken. And there was, broad pushback on this, in part because it's Trump, or ostensibly because it was Trump, but maybe because of other reasons. Where else do we need to disengage, and what does that disengagement look like? Do we just leave Afghanistan? What does that say to our NATO allies? Although we'll get to NATO is another question as well.
Yeah, so we've got a forever war framework via the war on terror that spans across good portion of the globe, the greater Middle East, North Africa, Afghanistan included in there. The U.S. has ground troops, not just in Afghanistan, but also in Iraq still, Syria, and Somalia. And I think the Biden administration, not just to secure our interests and protect our people, but also to restore a modicum of credibility where the American people should bring those conflicts to a close in a clear way over the course of its 4 years. It really would not be a good thing if the next candidate can run saying, Joe Biden has prosecuted the forever war still, and there's just overwhelming support. About 3/4 of the American public, which doesn't agree on very much, agrees that U.S. troops should come home from Afghanistan and Iraq. That's just an overwhelming number. So I think to restore some health to our own democracy, and by the way, not create this sense of, keep feeding this sense of existential fear that, we have enemies out there that want to kill us and that's why we've got to kill them. This is incredibly important to bring those conflicts to a close. And it should be done responsibly. But in the case of Afghanistan, the United States has made an agreement with the Taliban, and U.S. troops are supposed to fully come home at the end of April. And I actually think that if Trump had been able to bring U.S. troops fully home from Afghanistan, it would have done Biden a favor and avoided Biden having to make now some difficult decisions. But, it's just unimaginable to me how the United States now, with a very small capacity, is fundamentally going to change the balance of power on the ground in Afghanistan.
Right.
We just cannot expect that we're going to lose a war, fight a war for 20 years, not be successful in achieving our grandiose goals, and then refuse to leave until conditions are ideal on the ground. They're not going to be ideal. It was the right thing to end the war in Vietnam. It did lead to the North's takeover of Vietnam. But, we have to be able to live with the consequences and get what we need. And what we need is to make sure that Afghanistan does not become a haven from which the United States is targeted by terrorists. And that's something, we should evaluate just as we evaluate threats from terrorism elsewhere, without continuing to be a participant in the violence in Afghanistan.
Well, I mean, I've forgotten now. Like, what was ostensibly our mission in Afghanistan? I mean, I remember, when Bin Laden was in Tora Bora, and we were surrounded him and then let him go, essentially, because we had to put people into Iraq. But what was and I remember there was a brief moment where people were talking about women's rights in Afghanistan and, putting in a democratically elected government there that is going to be in charge of not just Kabul, but everywhere. But we didn't put any resources into that country beyond our military, it seems to me. Like, I don't remember the big project to build all the roads
or build schools
I think at one point we were painting them. But I don't that ended, it seems to me, 15 years ago. And we've just been there, maybe keeping the Taliban from taking over a certain part of the country at any given point. I mean, is that basically what the mission has been? And that doesn't seem to be doing, like you say, I guess it doesn't seem to be doing anything.
Well, the release of the Afghanistan papers last year revealed just how skeptical most senior officials and military leaders have been that the United States could achieve its objective in Afghanistan almost from the beginning. I mean, the initial objective is actually something I support. Look, the United States was attacked on 9/11. The enemy was al-Qaeda. The United States then set out to decimate al-Qaeda and also punish the Taliban government for harboring al-Qaeda. That makes sense. That goal was quickly achieved. Unfortunately, we did not get the leader of al-Qaeda, bin Laden, but nevertheless, al-Qaeda was hurt badly. It was quickly achieved. And so instead of saying, okay, if we don't pull back now, we'll never have a coherent reason to pull back. We continued and expanded the mission to nation building, making exactly who believed that we were going to turn Afghanistan into a liberal democracy is an interesting question, and when those beliefs waxed and waned. But we've actually, made considerable efforts. It's not exactly for want of trying. The Obama administration implemented a a major surge of troops in Afghanistan, and caught bin Laden. So there was another off-ramp to say, hey, we have achieved our mission. If we don't stop this now, when is it going to end? But unfortunately, that off-ramp was not taken. And so here we are with a war that basically nobody can defend. I mean, the Taliban keeps gaining ground. Nobody is seriously proposing in Washington to come up with a creative, strategy backed by significant new resources to really change the equation. We're afraid to leave.
How much do we need Congress to act in this instance? Like, I mean, if they revoke the AMF could they end this, or is it just a question of like our government is structured in such a way that the president has so much more ability to impact foreign policy, even without, broad statutory authority, that there's a much better chance of, because you don't have as many different political, influences for the president to simply make a decision and do this?
You're right that the president has broad discretion. And if the president truly wants to order a withdrawal, the president can certainly do that, which is important to keep in mind in the case of Trump. Despite all the rhetoric about withdrawals, when those withdrawals don't happen, it bespeaks a lack of will on the part of the president.
Saying we're going to withdraw multiple times throughout his presidency, and there's always some back channel which gets them out of it. That's
right. But Congress can absolutely step up always and do its job. I mean, it's in the Constitution. Congress is supposed to declare war. Now, we haven't declared war since World War II, but we do have an authorization for the use of force from 2001, which the president is still using. Congress ought to repeal that and replace it with a much more limited authorization that specifies the location, specifies the enemy, and has sunset provisions. So Congress has to face this question and do their job again and again. Plus, Congress does ultimately control the purse strings.
Right. All right. Well, you also argue that number 3 is to stop policing the Middle East, which I think is, we've touched on. In my mind, to say that our policing of the Middle East has been a function of our security is sort of a second order thing. To me, it's more about maintaining our hegemony, which, arguably some people say we need for our security. I don't know. I mean, there's seems to me like, a lot of other countries out there that have shown that you don't need to have hegemony to have security. But in fact, maybe the rest of the country of the world,
all countries,
right? But be that as it may, let's jump to the you call for Biden to resist NATO expansion. Let's roll that into China as well, because there was a story out today that in the Wall Street Journal talking about a report that was commissioned by the NATO Secretary General, that its focus should change to China. And certainly there are 3 data points I have on this and the whole turn to China. One is going back 20 years ago, Gary Hart, I interviewed shortly after, back in 2004, and he told a story. He sat on a committee about threats to United States. He, and I think it was maybe Rudman, chaired a 21st century U.S. security threat commission. On the first meeting, they went around the table with 20 people. What's their threat? All of them said, and this was in the summer of 2000, I think, non-state actors, essentially like Al-Qaeda. One person said China. Everybody laughed. They reconvened 3 or 4 months later. Same thing. China. That person never came back again. That person was Lynn Cheney. And then we have the pivot, which was both on a commercial side, the TPP to isolate China. And I was telling Emma, I got held over on a flight in LA. I went down to the USS Iowa, and walked in to look at where our bases were, our Pacific, and the guy working there said that we had moved all of our naval operations to the Pacific in anticipation of trying to contain China. I was like, I didn't know that. He's, oh, yeah. And that's happened under the Obama administration. What's going on with our perspective on China? NATO's now attempting to get involved. Where should we be, and where should Joe Biden go, and where do you think we're headed?
That's very interesting about NATO, because Europe has been, and I think continues to be, quite divided on the China question. The United States under Trump has been pushing Europe to be more anti-China than some people have wanted to go. So we'll see about NATO. Is NATO fit for purpose to be a bulwark against China is a good question as a North Atlantic security organization, but it's always searching for a new purpose after the fall of the Soviet Union. So maybe this will give it something coherent to do. I'm really concerned about the tenor of U.S.-China relations. And we talked about the shift toward...
I mean, do we need a bulwark against China? I mean, like, in what way and why?
Well, look, China poses a number of challenges. It has been coercive in the use of economic diplomacy, particularly in its own region. Look at the way it punished Australia concerning Australia's objections to Chinese transparency vis-a-vis the virus. Mm-hmm. Its human rights abuses are terrible, no doubt about it, right? And we do have economic competition. But the military threat from China has been massively inflated by members of both political parties. I do not go to bed at night worried that China is going to attack this country.
Stephen, do you think that has to do with the economic competition, the desire to ramp up that kind of rhetoric in order to get the public behind more aggressive economic action, whatever that may be?
Yeah, I think that, voters who are anti-China, they're thinking of their jobs, their communities, and they're blaming China for that, or they're blaming deals that we've made, right? And that makes sense. But the people in Washington who are looking for, I'm afraid, a way to keep the defense budget healthy, which is to say more than half of our federal discretionary budget year after year, are using every objection against China, including legitimate objections, lumping that together with this sense of military threat. But hardly anyone believes China is about to invade South Korea, Japan, Australia, the Philippines, U.S. allies. It has increased its military capabilities roughly in line with the growth of its economy over the past several decades. And what I really fear is that the United States just cannot say no to trying to be the dominant military power in the Indo-Pacific region. And it's just going to view any expansion of Chinese military capability as a threat to itself, when in fact that's maybe a threat to the U.S. ability to operate militarily, but not a threat to the United States or the vital interests of the American people. We actually have an opportunity right now with China to focus on the things that matter most to the American people and the planet: climate change, pandemic disease. These things call for more cooperation, not harsher confrontation. And we know also, I think we have a period of time at least. It may be that China gets more aggressive in a military sense later on as it rises. That is possible. And that's a legitimate worry. But it doesn't have the forces or the desire to go on some sort of military rampage. So we have time to take a step back, allow the countries, our partners, allies, and others in the region who are more threatened than we are by the possibility of future Chinese aggression to judge these threats for themselves, spend more money on their military if they think the threat requires it, form coalitions to counterbalance China. We could play some role in facilitating those counterbalancing coalitions as well. But we have time. But I'm afraid that what most of the national security community wants to do is put ourselves on the front line, not prudently wait and assess the threat and let others take the initiative.
Is that simply just a function of like, there's money to be made? I mean, and I'm talking specifically in the massive military budget. I mean, it's harder now for me to sort of like wrap my head around the interplay between the military and the economics. Like, in the 20th century, maybe the earlier part, and certainly the 19th century, I could see like, well, you need a navy because you need your shipping lanes to be open. But where does that interplay exist now in the context of China? Like, why are we putting so many ships in the Pacific? I mean, I understand they got to go somewhere, and maybe they're just like, well, there's nowhere else to put them.
We got so many.
But we could also decommission a bunch of them, and we could do that. But what is the interplay, if there is any? And I certainly, I think it's another episode of the program to talk about. Let's have our supply lines. Let's not be so contingent upon what's going on in China for our supply lines. Let's have some redundancy, et cetera, et cetera. But putting that aside, like what is even the justification for this other than to say like, they're Chinese, they could be coming after us?
Well, there you go. That's the justification, basically. But I think there's no question that the concentrated interests are a tremendous problem. It's why the massive military budgets are must-pass items in Congress year after year. I think the specter of competing with China also solves a problem if you want to keep this general U.S. role in the world going right now, precisely because China is actually not so reckless in its use of military power. Not many people think that we're going to get into a war with China in the near term. So if you're looking at calls among the American public and even political leaders to, end endless war, a weariness of military intervention, well, here you've got an opponent that, we can spend a lot of money in the name of deterrence. And if there's going to be a conflict, we're kicking that can down the road. That's probably not going to happen for a while. Now, meanwhile, just as in the first Cold War, we may come back into the Middle East and fight proxy wars in the global South, which will be endless wars again. But, for now, it's a nice fantasy to imagine that we will discipline ourselves and engage in a more strategic competition, and deterrence will always work. The problem is that by, again, putting ourselves on the front line, we are eliminating the incentive for others to step up, judge threats for themselves. And, maybe ultimately China doesn't feel so threatened as a result. And there's greater peace and prosperity in that region, and certainly in the United States.
So in other words, in some ways, China's a great boogeyman because they're never going to come out of the closet and actually attack us. And we can just, we can just generate a lot of cash for a certain group of people. And it's low, I guess, jeopardy, except for the fact that we're just burning all this cash. And who knows what happens when you make all these military machines, people want to use them.
Yeah, and we're, creating antagonism with the world's number 2 power. Meanwhile, the planet's burning. China's the largest emitter of greenhouse gases. We can have a Green New Deal at home and get our emissions down to zero. That will not solve the planetary problem of climate change. You need China in that. And China's been the number 1 developer of green technologies in many areas, including electric vehicles, solar panels. So if we were really concerned about, let's say, climate change, leaving aside pandemic disease as a national security threat, maybe that would be our priority instead of potentially creating military antagonisms between the world's number one and number two powers.
Well, Stephen Wertheim, from your mouth to Joe Biden's ears and those around him, thank you so much for joining us today. Folks should check out your book, Tomorrow of the World. We will put a link to your book and to the piece in Foreign Policy at majority.fm. Thanks again.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
All right, folks, going to take a quick break. Back in a moment. So, Bill Barr decided that there was really no way to salvage this Trump thing. I have a feeling that to a certain extent, he got word that this was starting to become a problem with Georgia, because this is also timed where Kelly Loeffler is apparently just gone nuts on Raphael Warnock in terms of like accusations and whatnot.
Well, Warnock has a better chance
indeed
even than Ossoff. Warnock is more formidable and someone to look out for, even though he doesn't have the name recognition online as much. That's right.
Ossoff, of course, was, I think, more well known because of his run in that special election 3 or 4 years ago. Here is how Fox evolved over the course of the day when it came to the question of Bill Barr announcing that the DOJ has no evidence of any type of fraud. And apparently he had spoken to the Department of Homeland Security. They had no evidence. Here's Andrew McCarthy on Fox News with Dana Perino.
And so far, we haven't seen anything to substantiate that. As I just getting this breaking news, that caught my eye. So let me turn it over to you for some reaction.
Well, I think, Dana, this is kind of a common sense assertion by the Attorney General, if you think about it, because, the Trump campaign had federal lawsuits that they brought in both Pennsylvania and Michigan and dropped them. And in connection with the Pennsylvania suit, they expressly told the federal judge that they were not alleging fraud and actually pulled the fraud counts out. And I just point that out because it's much harder to make a criminal election fraud case than it is to make a civil election fraud case. Oh. So if they're unable to prove this up in a civil court, I don't know why anyone would be surprised that there's no evidence, at least at the moment, for a criminal case. You would think that they would have made more progress on the civil side if they had that kind of compelling evidence.
And the Attorney General did take a step. I think it was.
There it is. Now, let's see how this evolved by end of day, a couple hours later, on Fox Business News with Lou Dobbs.
Good evening, everybody. President Trump, his legal team, members of the Republican Party, making advances today in the battle for the White House. There have been significant developments in 6 key battleground states, all of which bolster President Trump's charge that there has been clear electoral fraud that nullified the will of the people in the November election. The president's progress puts him at odds with the insidious rhinos, radical Dems, corporate America, big tech, and the deep state who have tried to overthrow his presidency for more than 4 years. Today, a member of his own cabinet appeared to join in with the radical Dems and the deep state and the resistance. Attorney General William Barr, who has been absent for weeks and weeks, telling the Associated Press that the U.S. attorneys and FBI agents who have followed up on complaints of specific voter fraud across the country have produced nothing. To date, we have not seen fraud on a scale, he said, that could have affected a different outcome in the election. For the Attorney General of the United States to make that statement, he is either a liar or a fool or both. He may be perhaps compromised. He may be simply unprincipled, or he may be personally distraught or ill. But in no way can he honestly stand up before the American people and say that the FBI has, with any integrity or intensity, investigated voter fraud in this country and then say it did not amount to anything. Because what we are hearing just from the eyewitnesses in state legislative hearings, forget all of the rest, those eyewitnesses in state legislative hearings across the country tell the truth. And it's a story of election fraud, elections rigged to deny the will of the majority in this country. And we will be taking that up here tonight.
There you go.
What do we even say?
There you go. The Bill Barr's distraught, ill, compromised,
And
joining with the
rhino.
insidious rhino. Of course, in these states that he's talking about, they have certified the votes. They've certified the election. In some of those instances, you're talking about Republican officials who have certified it. It is the entire world against Donald Trump. And you would only think that Donald Trump would have taken more than just 25% of that $170 million that he has raised, probably closer to $200 million at this point, and put all of it towards maintaining the will of the American public. But, you got to put some away, too,
He's
for
got
later.
some debt.
All right. And that's it for us today. We will see you tomorrow. Unless, of course, you're sticking around for the fun half of the show.
Woohoo.
And when you do, well, you're going to hear us. We got a lot more sound to go through, a lot more stories. I want to talk about Section 230, too, which is Donald Trump is using. It's Section 230. Well, we'll talk about this in the fun half, but Section 230 is the part of the Digital Millennium Act, I think it is, that basically says websites are platforms as opposed to publishers. Mm-hmm. And so if commenters, or if you're a YouTube, if someone uploads it to YouTube or someone comments on a YouTube thing and they libel somebody, or in a YouTube show, I guess slander somebody, that YouTube is not responsible. Or if somebody goes to majority.fm and was to leave comments that were slanderous, or I should say liable, I guess, they would be writing them, that I wouldn't be responsible.
Right.
It's a in broad strokes, I am in favor of that, but it needs some tweaks, because I do think it is a problem, and I think it has that immunity and that ability to classify themselves as platform versus a publisher has allowed them, some of these companies, to amass an enormous amount of influence and wealth and power. That
also results in misinformation.
It also results in misinformation. I'm not sure we can ever stop misinformation. Mm-hmm. We've always had it. The problem with it now is its ability to overpower other information.
Exactly.
And, like Alex Jones has been around for 25 years at least. And so we will talk more about that in the fun half, among other things that we will talk about. But let me just tell you this, folks: if you want to be join us in the fun half, become a member of the show. Go to jointhemajority.report.com. Become a member of the show. You can gift the show. Do we still have cucknation.org? Is that still? I should say, is it cucknation.com or cucknation.org?
Yes.
Speaking of
cucknation.org goes to tmbs.fm.
Oh, he changed it? That son of a bitch. Well, look at that. Well, all right. Well, we've got you can find at jointhemajority.report.com. You can get, you can do a gifting situation for the show, set up by Ronald Reagan back in the day, who sent us some apples. Did we talk about the apples? Did we thank Ronald Reagan?
Thank you, Ronald Reagan.
Listener Ronald Reagan.
I had one yesterday. I was famished, in need of replenishment, and
He
They gave it to me.
Well, we should talk about this in the fun half. How he addressed the box to here. That was pretty. And he ended up embarrassing himself more than anything else. But with that said, you can become a member at jointhemajority.report.com. You can gift a membership to people at jointhemajority.report.com. And you can also buy some holiday swag. It looks very similar to our non-holiday swag, but you can go to shop.majorityreportradio.com. All of our swag is American-made, union-made, union-printed, right? Brendan? There was like one thing that we couldn't get, like...
Everything is union printed.
Everything's union printed. Thank you, Brendan. And so check that out, shop.majorityreportradio.com. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. And we'll see you in it's swag, not swag, Sammy. All right, sorry. All right, see you in the fun half.
In for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy.
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt. Can we bring back DJ Danerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
Psych. Fuck 'em. Almost says what?
What?
Almost says what? Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black Africans. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
See Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy! I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here. I am a total pussy.
We are back. Sam Seder, fun half. Emma Vigeland, fun half. So Mo on the IM, who wrote in, it's swag, not schwag, Sammy. And then I said swag. And then Mo wrote, just looking out, nothing but love. Oh, shit, I think it is swag. My bad, LOL, just looked it up. My bad, keep doing your thing. There you go.
Well, I thought it was swag, and it was just a fun thing you were doing to kind of personalize it.
No, I think it's swag is what I always knew it as.
Well, wait, swag is stuff we all get. Swag is something different. Swag, like, what context, I guess, are we using it in? Like you get at award shows, you would get like
swag.
No, at award shows you get swag bags. That's what it's called.
Swag. Products given away for free. Oh wait, that's for free.
No.
Oh, and swag could be like.
Wait, I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
Huh. You know what? Matt is right.
I was always told that swag was crappy weed growing up.
What?
Yeah.
I think
mids.
I'm right, actually. No, swag.
Swag
bag.
Swag is okay.
Swag bags, swag packs.
So actually, the reality is that it's swag and swag. Swag actually stands for stuff we all get. Swag, though, is also stuff that you get for free. And so that like one of those things.
Right.
What we're selling is not really swag or swag. That is probably incorrect. It's simply just merchandise.
Yeah.
It's merch.
Merch.
Yeah.
Merch. It's merch.
Or schmerch.
Or schmerch. Nikki in Nestoria says, I hear Marin say swag too. I think look, back in the day, I would get free stuff when I would go to things. Like the thing I went to one time. I got stuff. Right. I got free stuff.
What was the thing?
I don't even remember. But you know what I did when I was on the on a sitcom? I got free Nike.
Oh, that's nice.
But that was back in '95, and I was like,
even though now
I wore Adidas, so
now Nike's suing the Chinese government because they won't let them
right.
use slave labor
I mean this
anymore.
was before
but they're so woke. Kaepernick.
This was in '93, so we didn't really, or '90. This was '95, so didn't really quite know what Nike was doing. But nevertheless, I say swag. Alamano says it that's okay. We're getting grief for talking about this stuff. Deserve it too.
Yeah.
Really deserve it. You know why there's no voter fraud, Emma?
Why?
You know why they're not finding any voter fraud? Well, Matt Gaetz has the reason why. The reason why there's no voter fraud is because there were not preventative measures to stop voter fraud. Therefore, you don't know about the voter fraud. That's why they haven't found it. Proof of its existence is that they have not found it. Let's hear Matt Gaetz explain.
Not enough to change the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. Joining me now is Florida Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz. What do you think about what the Justice Department just said, Congressman?
I think the Department of Justice has a lot of egg on their face for having not discovered a lot of this fraud as it was occurring. I think the Department of Justice should have intervened and opposed the consent decree in the state of Georgia that reduced the amount of rejected ballots as a consequence of a signature match not occurring. There were places where we had dedicated FBI officials and Department of Justice officials in my home state of Florida, ensuring that there was not fraud in the registration process, in the ballot harvesting process. But I think we should have seen the Civil Rights Division a lot more aggressive to stop the ballot harvesting in the first place. David, as you know, this is very hard to find, prove, and obtain relief on after the fact because so many of the ballots get commingled.
Right. Well, and they were even talking about washing these Dominion voting machines clean. Thank goodness a court put a stop to that, though we don't know how many of the machines were washed. Let me ask about the dust.
So if I get this straight, you cannot. The only evidence of the fraud exists in the actual act of because the fraud doesn't exist once it's happened, according to him. There's no evidence of it. But you can't, and it doesn't exist as the ballots being cast. The fraud exists only at the time before you stop the fraud from happening.
Right. It's like,
there's no analogy.
What's the kind of energy that it, it's not moving, but it's not kinetic energy?
Static.
static energy, that kind of, the fraud's always there, but it may not be in motion, but it's still fraud.
Once it moves in motion, it's impossible to prove that it happened.
Right. Well, I mean, so
what is it about the ballot that once it commingles, you can't tell whether it's fraudulent or not?
I don't know. I guess it gets too messy. It gets too messed up.
It honestly sounds like they're concerned about miscegenation or something. Like that word of commingled, it's like race mixing.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
and
what,
ironic that
it's ballots.
Civil Rights Division.
They're chameleon,
of the DOJ.
Chameleon ballots.
Right.
Once they commingle, they take on the look of the other ballots.
And so he's basically accusing, without saying his name, Barr of not doing anything preemptively about all the fraud that was going to happen that Trump said was going to cause him to lose the election if he lost the election. But if he won, then there was no fraud whatsoever, right? But that's not even true, because Bill Barr did an unprecedented action where he signaled and directed the U.S. attorneys to basically take into consideration allegations of any voter fraud pretty much at all before the vote was certified, which is completely against protocol. So there was preemptive action taken.
That's right.
Gaetz just wants to pretend that didn't happen so that they can still think, Trump was installed by Hugo Chavez.
What is fascinating, though, is these federal agencies.
Biden, excuse me.
These federal agencies performed so much better, according to Gaetz. I mean, in states that Trump won. God, Chavez is just a genius. He's a genius. I mean, Hugo Chavez, like this guy.
He galaxy brains so much that beyond the grave, his tentacles are still being felt in this election.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mysterious ways.
You think he's dead?
I don't know. I mean, like Jesus, I guess he lives within us all.
Bought that line and sinker, didn't you, Emma?
I did. I guess so.
Oh, the old Hugo Chavez is dead line. Well, that's good. It's good that you believe that.
I say it every show. I mention Chavez because I can't get over Sidney Powell talking about Hugo Chavez being intimately involved in Dominion voting machines beyond the grave.
As that guy on Fox Business News, what was his name? Not Gaetz, but the other guy. He mentioned the servers. They haven't been wiped, the Dominion servers. The military had to put out a statement, the Army did, saying that despite what a retired Air Force 3-star general claimed, incidentally, that guy, it's McNerney, I guess his name. He was a former Fox News contributor because apparently he said torture worked on McCain, and that McCain was
loser.
There was some problem that they booted him from, but he also got the job on Fox because he was pushing the fact that Barack Obama was not born in this country.
Cool.
And that all Muslim men should be strip searched at airports. That was what got him the job. It was the McCain stuff that got him fired. Anyways, he's the one who came out and said that the 305 Military Intelligence Battalion, or the Kraken, I think Sidney Powell referred to them, that went into Germany and secured the servers. That because they had to go in and get the servers from the Germans, who were because the votes ran through the servers there, which was also part of the CIA op to go get those servers. And of course, some U.S. military were hurt there. Apparently, the Army came out and said, that's
not true.
That allegation is false. It is not true. It is a entry-level training intel battalion that's made up of Army privates straight out of basic training or still training for their first military jobs. So I don't know. Maybe that's who you would send in.
Yeah, obviously, as agents of Cuba, they're the freshest face ones. I'm sorry, I mixed it up. It's too convoluted.
But there it is. So everybody's getting in on the picture saying that Sidney Powell is a lunatic. But that's not going to stop anything. That almost proves that she's not. It's the same theory with the fraudulent ballots. If the absence of proof is proof that it exists.
Yeah.
So there you have. I want you to watch this. Is a pretty movie. It's a little bit long, but this is it's pretty stunning. Now, I'd be curious to hear from people in Georgia how much play this is getting, because this has got to hurt Loeffler and Perdue. He doesn't name them directly. He sort of does a little bit. In my mind, he should have been more explicit, but I think he's a Republican official. He is a Georgia election official. He is the voting systems manager, which of course is. How
do they need more Republicans in Georgia to come out and say these things?
This guy really had enough, and gosh, I feel bad for him, because that they're having to put guards in front of his house now after coming out and doing this. But watch this. This is pretty a little bit intense.
Good afternoon. My name is Gabriel Sterling. I'm the Voting System Implementation Manager for the state of Georgia. And just to give you all a heads up, this is going to be sort of a two-part press conference today. And at the beginning of this, I'm going to do my best to keep it together, because it has all gone too far. All of it. Joe DeGenova today asked for Chris Krebs, a patriot who ran CISA, to be shot. A 20-something tech in Gwinnett County today has death threats and a noose put out saying he should be hung for treason because he was transferring a report on batches from an EMS to a county computer so he could read it. It has to stop. Mr. President, you have not condemned these actions or this language. Senators, you have not condemned this language or these actions. This has to stop. We need you to step up, and if you're going to take a position of leadership, show some. My boss, Secretary Raffensperger, his address is out there. They have people doing caravans in front of their house. They've had people come onto their property. Tricia, his wife of 40 years, is getting sexualized threats through her cell phone. It has to stop. This is elections. This is the backbone of democracy, and all of you who have not said a damn word are complicit in this. It's too much. Yes, fight for every legal vote. Go through your due process. We encourage you, use your First Amendment. That's fine. Death threats, physical threats, intimidation. It's too much. It's not right. They've lost the moral high ground to claim that it is. I don't have all the best words to do this because I'm angry. And the straw that broke the camel's back today is, again, this 20-year-old contractor for a voting system company just trying to do his job. Just there. In fact, I talked to Dominion today and I said he's one of the better ones they got. His family's getting harassed now. There's a noose out there with his name on it. It's not right. I've got police protection outside my house. Fine. You know, I took a higher profile job. I get it. Secretary ran for office. His wife knew that too. This kid took a job. He just took a job. And it's just wrong. I can't begin to explain the level of anger I have right now over this. And every American, every Georgian, Republican and Democrat alike, should have that same level of anger. Mr. President, it looks like you likely lost the state of Georgia. We're investigating. There's always a possibility. I get it. And you have the rights to go through the courts. What you don't have the ability to do, and you need to step up and say this, is stop inspiring people to commit potential acts of violence. Someone's going to get hurt. Someone's going to get shot. Someone's going to get killed. And it's not right. It's not right. And y'all, I don't have anything scripted. This is, like I said, I'm going to do my best to keep it together. All of this is wrong. DeGenova, who said for Chris Krebs to get shot? It's a former U.S. attorney. He knows better. The people around the president know better. Mr. President, as the Secretary said yesterday, people aren't giving you the best advice on what's actually going on the ground. It's time to look forward. If you want to run for re-election in 4 years, fine, do it. But everything we're seeing right now, there's not a path. Be the bigger man here and step in, tell your supporters, don't be violent, don't intimidate. All that's wrong. It's un-American.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that Trump isn't getting the right information, and this is all coming from the top down. You think if Trump was not acting definitively and was saying, I don't know, maybe I did lose the election, that any of this would be happening? That any of this would be happening?
You know, I was just watching on Twitter that guy, and I started to think maybe I'm getting bad advice.
Yeah.
I mean,
people surrounding me, they may not be looking out for my best interests, except it's all him. It's all comes down from him. I mean, he runs the White House like an authoritarian, and he pits people against each other, and they do his bidding. I mean, Bill Barr just now, for the first time in his tenure as AG, has done something that Trump didn't want. But he was willing to do away with norms, skirt legal processes, and be, dictatorial in his own way.
Right. So 4 weeks later, too, let's be clear. Like,
yeah, I do feel bad for the guy, and he's trying to make a plea because he has things he wants to protect people, right? So he's trying to speak to his audience in Trump. So I'm nitpicking that point because you know what? I felt the same way too, because it's the second or third time I've watched it, and I felt more sympathetic for the guy the first time. Right. But then it's like, well, Donald Trump, like the idea that you're appealing to Donald Trump doesn't give a crap. Yeah. He doesn't. Donald Trump's not getting bad advice. Donald Trump is not, to the extent that he's a rational player in this, it's only because he cares only about himself. The people who could stop this, are the senators in his state. Exactly. The people who could stop this are people like Mitch McConnell. It has always been, Donald Trump has existed. The cowards in this, and I don't even say, cowards is almost like letting them off the hook a little bit. Because they're grifters, they're opportunists.
They're
people, they're careerists who are willing to sacrifice any norm, any principle they may have, anything that they learned as kids of how to treat people in order to advance their own careers and get rich. I mean, that's what it is. It's not even cowardice.
And if he wants to really change that behavior, he's got to call them out. But I assume that on some level it's naivete on his part. Yeah. The idea like Donald Trump can't be this inhumane, can't be this narcissistic, can't be like, and it's also sort of framed in this way like, if there was a chance that he could win, it would be okay to push this kind of violent rhetoric, but
the "it's gone too far" refrain is kind of tells that point, right? Like a certain level of this is okay, but guys, a contractor might
come on.
But now that it's affecting people I know, exactly. Okay, that's the most cynical take there. But look, that guy doesn't deserve this. His coworkers don't deserve this. But yeah, appealing to Republican humanity, and especially appealing to Donald Trump's humanity, his non-existent humanity, probably not the most fruitful route to go down.
No. This is going to be a little bit sad, ladies and gentlemen. Do you remember Brad Parscale? I mean, it's been.
Are you crying?
I'm tearing up a little bit. Brad has had a rough go of it ever since he was let go from the Trump campaign.
Yeah. Shirtless, arrested.
Yes, he spent a lot of time laundering money to all sorts of people around Trump's orbit as part of the supposed campaign that he was running. And it hurts when you get cut loose. Here he is on with Martha McCallum.
I love Donald Trump. I mean, he's like family to me. That whole family is my family. And I want nothing more than him to win. I want nothing more than this country to progress the way it was. The president should have won by a lot more. He shouldn't be fighting. And I still think he might pull this off, which will be, I give it 100% credit to him if he pulls it off.
Have you talked to the president lately?
I've not. And it's pretty hurtful, but it's probably just as much my fault as his. I love that family, and I gave every inch of my life to him. Every inch.
Inch?
What would you say to him?
Keep fighting. Don't give up. Don't give up. The country needs you.
Measure life in inches.
What? I gave
every mile.
My life is almost 7 feet long.
Life is a game of inches, folks.
Wow. I mean,
also he's my family, and
I got along with the family so well. It's a shame.
They're like my family, and I'd do anything for them. Has he called you, and you've been had a rough time?
It's probably both our faults.
Yeah,
it's probably both our faults that he hasn't called me.
What did I do? What did I do? Well, he didn't need you anymore, buddy.
Yes, we made a deal.
He look like a guy who, I know that harping on people's physical appearance is low, right? Like, but it's not his appearance. It's just the way he styles himself. He's like a guy at a bar watching WWE. Like, doesn't look like a politician or anyone in politics. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing.
Well, it's
just a bizarre.
He wasn't
fashion.
a caddy, right? He wasn't the guy who was the caddy.
No, he wasn't.
But he just basically did some web stuff, and then he just got. But here he is. And to be honest with you, you gotta chalk it up for Brad here. This might have been a good point. Like maybe the way he handled this whole COVID thing. I don't know. I mean.
Percent possibly loss of suburban families, right? The men and women in the suburbs, Philly suburbs, Atlanta suburbs. I think that goes to one thing. And I think it was the decision on COVID to go for opening the economy versus public empathy. And I think a young family with a young child who were scared to take them back to school wanted to see an empathetic president and an empathetic Republican Party. And I think that, and I said this multiple times, and he chose a different path. And I don't think anything's wrong with this. I love him. But, we had a difference on this. I thought we should have public empathy. I think people were scared. I walked around people and watched people walk around me. Not like 2 years ago, and they just don't walk next because I'm Brad Parscale, but walk around me because I got a mask on now, and they just don't want to get COVID. I could see how waitresses stand a little farther from the table. People were scared. And I think if he would have been publicly empathetic, he would have won. By a landslide then. I think he could have leaned into it instead of run away from it.
So it sounds like you think that was the biggest error. Empathy over COVID.
Yes. I mean, not a bad point. But
not a bad point, but it's sort of interesting. It's like he should have pretended that he cared as opposed to just completely deny. Like there's also there's an option C, which is actually do something about it.
Yeah. It's not about the optics of it. Also, okay.
I mean,
I take that back.
Parscale could be right, but it could have been but it's also
But I don't think he could. He could have done something, and that's it. Because no one buys Trump being empathetic, and even the people that like him don't want him to be empathetic. That's not a character trait that they want in him. But again, dude, you're so pathetic. Stop saying you love him. Stop saying you love him. He won't call you.
Listen, you know what? If I'm Brad Parscale, the trajectory of this guy's life, the millions of dollars he probably has in some type of offshore account that came out of that fund, I'm Trump earned his love. I just love this idea that he really should have just seemed like he cared that people were dying. There's 2,500 people, according to the New York Times, died yesterday.
270,000 total deaths.
270,000 total. 2,600 people died yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And that number, I will tell you right now, folks, that number is going to go up before it goes down. Maybe you may have a day or two where it's below that. But by the time we get to Christmas, we're going to be pushing 3,000 people dying a day. We are going to end up more than likely losing almost as many people as we did, maybe more at this stage. 50 days of this than we did in the 1918 pandemic, where you didn't have the ability to do remote work. Anybody did. Nobody did.
Not television stations telling you all of the precautions that you need to take, everything. Not Amazon delivering packages to you whenever you need.
Where you have hospitals that theoretically have more capacity than they did in 1917.
Access to all of the things that you could potentially need, except if, of course, if you're poor.
It's just, and the irony of all of this on some level is like, Parscale was right. Like, he was giving him good advice.
Yeah.
And just a note on his trajectory, he was a sort of web graphic design guy, and he got hired in 2012 by Trump International Realty after a deliberately low bid of $10,000 that led to further work with the Trump family for Trump Winery, the Eric Trump Foundation, and Caviar Complex, Melania Trump's line of skincare products.
Right. Well, that qualifies you to run a campaign.
Well, apparently he was the only one who was smart enough to say, like, hey,
well, yeah,
you should maybe take this pandemic seriously.
Yeah, but again, his advice is signaling empathy, pretending to be empathetic, as opposed to, doing the actual work.
Of course. I mean, they're a den of sociopaths. I mean, at the very least, you can have he's just the smartest sociopath in the room going like, hey,
Trump's the queen sociopath.
From everything I've read, it looks like you should pretend like you care about this.
Like, isn't part of sociopathy mimicking the correct response?
Exactly. He's the only one with the brains in there. Like, my understanding is that in normal amongst the humans, they're going to want it to seem like you care that their relatives are dying or that they can't send their kids to school.
Shut up, cuck.
Exactly. Just not fortunate enough to have actual sociopaths in the room. Just pretend sociopaths. All right, let's talk about this Section 230. So this Section 230, like I said, is part of, I think is it the Digital Millennium Act?
I don't think it is.
Digital Millennium Copyright Act, I think.
Okay. And
I
so
read something different.
230 was a way to protect the ability of platforms to provide user-created content, essentially, whether that is comments on your blog or whether it's videos uploaded to YouTube, or comments on YouTube, or stuff on Twitter. And it protects like Twitter, and it protects Google, and it protects you if you have your blog. And it sounds like a very good idea. And I think for the most part, it is. Certainly, free speech absolutists say that it's a good thing. Now, the fact is that, of course, you don't have total free speech. These companies, the person who owns the blog can moderate it and block you from commenting. YouTube can say you violated our services and we're going to block you from commenting. Now, if I was back in the day, we had a blog associated with this show on Air America, Majority Report Radio.com. We never moderated, and we would get something like 30 or 40,000 unique visitors a day. We would get in an hour thousands of comments because at that time there was no, there wasn't much going on, and people hadn't associated with the radio. I never moderated because I was like, I don't care. And I had the ability to do that and not worry about it because I wasn't going to get sued for some moron going on there and saying, whatever, or some smart person going on there and saying whatever. It didn't matter. And to me, there was a lot of value in that. But if I blocked somebody on that site, it really wouldn't matter that much, because there's plenty of other places, particularly back then, where you could go and you could comment. Like, it's not like the Majority Report Radio was a utility.
Well, now we have,
unfortunately, exactly.
Twitter, Facebook have become public
YouTube.
utilities.
These things have become essentially utilities where so much of our media and our narrative and our conventional wisdom and our communication runs through these platforms. And
who are that big precisely because they asked to be by buying off politicians, specifically many Democratic politicians, in order to get that big and squash competition.
They took advantage of a
wild
change,
West.
Change that took place in our antitrust perspective, essentially, that took place, started in the 80s and has caught hold through the 90s. They took advantage of that and were basically, like you say, they were just happened to be, could have been something else, could have been some other. It didn't have to be YouTube. It could have been, I don't know, whatever their rival was at the time. It could have been Justin TV. Well, that ended up being Twitch. But it could have been, I can't remember what the names of the, Telestream or whatever it was.
Right.
It just so happens that it was YouTube. They got the financing, and then they became a monster, and they kept buying up all the stuff, and Google bought up all the stuff. Facebook bought up all their competitors, and Instagram and Amazon bought up all their competitors, et cetera, et cetera. And so you have these consolidations. And now to get banned or from one of these platforms really does actually mean something. And, what exactly it means, I don't know, but I definitely know it's more than getting banned from Majority Report Radio, let's say. And so we have a bit of a problem here, because I don't want, and I don't think society wants, people not to have a right to say what they want to say for the most part in these forums. Obviously within the bounds, but.
And especially if that determination is made by an arbitrary panel of executives at Twitter?
Well, they're doing that to a certain extent, but they would have to do it much more. And here's the thing, this is what would happen in practice, okay? If you got rid of 230, they would immediately have, I don't know, Trump is a bad example because maybe the relationship because he's a president, but there would be a fraction of accounts left. Because any assertion and whatnot that it was even somewhat dubious, they could get sued for immediately. And smaller companies even more, right? Because then the slap suits, you could really just eliminate people and entities. It would involve them having to do a lot more real human moderation to have a business model. In fact, it would probably destroy the business model to a large extent. However, here's the dilemma. They're arguing they're a platform, not publishing. But they're not just a platform. Yeah. They're not, this is not a utility in terms of they're not agnostic like a utility. Like when we think of a utility, right? It's the phone lines. It is the internet. One of the reasons why we want net neutrality is because we do not want Verizon, say, to be anything except for just a common carrier versus someone with editorial control. And that editorial control that takes place on the internet would be, this service is better than that service. They may have a financial incentive in it. They certainly do.
Yes.
But they're still editorializing how that common carrier should work. YouTube and Facebook and Twitter, they editorialize every single day.
Right.
When I do this show, even if I was to deliver every story without an opinion, the stories that I choose to tell you are in and of itself editorial, right? I mean, I think 230 is important, but I'm not covering that story. And so there is an editorial decision that's being made there. And so I do think that there needs to be some tweak to 230, because to pretend that YouTube or Facebook or any of these platforms are just platforms, that they're not publishers in the sense that a publisher is relevant because they're making an editorial choice. I think what needs to happen is that you need to take away as much of that editorial control. If you're going to not give them liability, if you're going to shield them from liability, then they should not have any ability to exercise editorial control. Now, how does that editorial control exercise itself?
But I feel like the editorial control should be so limited as like if we're talking about public utilities, right? And say the internet is an example, or take TV, for example, when, we had public television stations, which I know they still exist, but it's much smaller. Those have small regulations where basically you can't use death threats, you can't say all of these things, and those regulations could be put in place by the government, not arbitrarily instituted by a panel of executives at Twitter and Facebook or something.
I disagree with that,
okay,
because I don't want the government to get into that business, because then you're talking about First Amendment rights. And that gets a lot more problematic. I think what you need to do is you say to these platforms, okay, you want liability from what is uploaded? That's fine. You don't have the ability anymore, though. We are going to regulate your ability to suggest, to shape the viewing experience of your viewers.
Through the algorithm, but the government's getting involved there too then.
That all they're saying is, we're not allowing you to take certain data from your viewers to track viewers or users. We're not allowing you to suggest stuff on there. If you want liability for what these people produce, then you don't get the right to push people to certain topics.
So you're saying if they want to be shielded from liability.
If you want to be shielded from liability, you also lose the ability to create algorithms to drive certain things. Now, what's going to happen if that happens? It is going to make their business significantly less profitable, because the reason why they have algorithms like this is so that they have the ability to isolate and identify who viewers are, who users are, so they can sell ads against that.
And it's also addictive because, say
but they only care about it being addictive because they're going to sell ads.
Yes.
And they could sell targeted ads. If you eliminate their ability to impose an algorithm to favor some content over others because of their algorithms or whatnot, whether they do it consciously or not, well, it's possible that Google doesn't do it consciously. They may do it reactively and say, like, okay, we're not necessarily pushing stuff. I'm just going to give them the benefit.
But there's they're aware of the consequences.
Of course,
there are a million think pieces and movies and whatever.
Of course. But if you eliminate their ability to actually in any way influence the flow of your interaction with that platform, right? That is content agnostic. And if it's going to genuinely be content agnostic, then you cannot impose upon the viewer any type of stream that they can follow. It's going to eliminate that company's ability to monetize at the level that they're doing. It's going to shrink the company. It's going to allow competitors to pop up, because all of a sudden, it's going to be just as profitable for me maybe to be on Parler as it is on Twitter or whatever. And
yeah, I mean, a lot of
as
your
a content producer,
a lot of your arguments seem to be more tailored to YouTube and what you're talking about.
Well, Facebook.
Facebook, but Twitter and censorship in that area, which is clearly what Trump is obsessed over here, I think is a different ballgame.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Twitter, I think,
that's more direct free speech expression, less monetizable content. This is just making claims. And so people getting arbitrarily banned from there, I think the threshold for something like Twitter, as opposed to media and more monetizable content, I know you can still monetize on Twitter, but I think that needs to be a whole separate conversation because that involves free speech protections and a panel of people with Jack and whoever making a decision. Oh, we're going to ban Milo Yiannopoulos. We're going to ban this. We're going to flag Trump's tweets. I understand the concerns about that, and I think those are legitimate.
I think there's just a lot less bar to entry for in places like Twitter. I mean, Twitter, I'm thinking, but it is true. I'm thinking Facebook. I'm thinking Amazon and Twitch and all of the things that Amazon owns. But Twitter does push content. There's no doubt.
I know.
And,
yeah.
and I think if you eliminate the ability of these companies to push content, because that's what publishing is, right? I mean, just because what was the HuffPost when it started? It was just an aggregator.
Yeah.
It's just pushing people to content. They don't even necessarily generate it. And so I think if you're going to get that liability protection, then you do not have the ability to push your users to any content. They've got to find it on their own. And that's it. And I think what that does is it makes it less profitable for them and it makes it harder for them to grow and become the dominant player in a sphere. And then the implications of being banned from Twitter become far less. They don't become utilities. The technology becomes a utility, but these platforms themselves don't become utilities.
I just go more down what Elizabeth Warren was proposing about breaking them up more in a traditional monopoly sense or antitrust sense, where you're not just, kind of regulating their algorithm, because I do think there is some value in, like, I watch the Majority Report. Maybe I'm interested in David Pakman's show, right? Or something like that, or TYT or whatever. I think there's user value in that. And I don't know if that's a significant enough trait. Like, I think you can break up their power in different ways without sacrificing a user experience.
Well, I think the idea in that instance is like, if you're gonna like the Majority Report and I'm gonna suggest to you watch the David Pakman show, then I got to make sure that I was gonna say Pakman's not stealing his set or something like that, but I got to make sure that I got to have if I'm gonna serve you up something, I've got to make sure that it's not something that's going to cause me liability, right? I mean, like that's I don't know. I think that is it's something. It's a conversation that we have to have. I want to bring somebody on to have this conversation because it is quite possible that a more direct antitrust type of approach achieves the same thing without getting into that, without sacrificing that user
That's
experience.
more of where I stand.
But I don't know, like Netflix, right? Like they're able to provide that user experience. And they take responsibility for what they're putting on there.
No, yeah,
it's not user-generated
shows
content.
Are different, but like also they have algorithms that track what people
Absolutely,
watch.
But they also know that like you're not.
You can't put like
Yeah, exactly. It's not user content. Exactly,
yeah, right.
exactly. Anyways, here is Tom Cotton. This guy, Tom Cotton, is maybe the most disingenuous person in the entire Senate.
Also maybe the most frightening.
And because of that, the most frightening. I mean, here's a guy, Harvard Law, I mean, just Ivy League elite and
well, he has an Arkansas draw.
Constantly deploying this. And here he is and they're talking about 230 for intimidation purposes rather than anything else. Here he is with Ainsley Earhart on Fox and Friends.
Let's talk about the defense bill because the president was tweeting out he is going to veto it unless Section 230 is repealed. He tweeted out, he said,
pause it for 1 second.
Section 230, which is
regardless of my nuanced take on 230, I hope that Donald Trump vetoes the defense bill. I hope that happens. I would be happy for that. I think we should continue to veto defense bill.
Yeah. Biden should keep that in his back pocket.
Exactly.
Right.
But go back to the beginning. I just want to make that clear. There's one thing like broken clock type of situation.
He tweeted out, he said, Section 230, which is a liability shielding gift from the U.S. to big tech, the only companies in America that have it, corporate welfare, is a serious threat to our...
Pause it for 1 second. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know it's annoying. But gun manufacturers also have that corporate liability. Pharma does too for its vaccines, but at least there's a sort of an arguable public health policy behind it. But continue.
National security and election integrity. Our country can never be safe and secure if we allow it to stand. Therefore, if the very dangerous and unfair Section 230 is not completely terminated as part of the National Defense Authorization Act, I will be forced to unequivocally veto the bill when sent to the very beautiful Resolute desk. Take back America now. Thank you. Why is it that social media is so protected from liability?
Well, there shouldn't be, Ainsley. Section 230 dates back to the very dawn of the internet in the 1990s when these companies were very small, very fragile startups, and we wanted to establish America as the world leader in the internet. That's not the case now. Some of these companies are the biggest and most powerful corporations in the history of the world. They don't just control, for instance, the flow of oil the way Standard Oil once did. They control the flow of information. Look what's happening in those Georgia races. Some of these companies are still prohibiting election ads on their platforms now that more than a month after the last election. That's in part because they don't want Republicans reaching people across the state of Georgia. That's why we need to get rid of Section 230. These companies can't say on the one hand that they're just a neutral platform and therefore they should be immune from any kind of liability, but on the other hand, also say that they get to change or edit or curate or censor content from conservatives across America. We can't allow that and we shouldn't allow it.
Well, Are they just censoring Republican ads?
Yeah,
they're allowing Democratic ads.
This is another case of Trump. I mean, Cotton does the. Matt, did you want to say something?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, no, this is another case of Trump taking a kernel of truth, which is like the nuanced conversation we were having earlier about Section 230, and twisting it to make his own narrative. And like, that's what he was so effective at in 2016. Like, oh, it's the swamp, but you know, that's why you should put me in charge. Right. No, the issues were what we discussed earlier about 230. He's saying that it's rigged against Republicans when all empirical data about social media sites and the algorithms and what it's created and the fake news and the misinformation, which will always be around, but on these social media sites, there has been, because of the algorithms, a toxic shareability that has infected people's minds and is no longer discernible from real things. Like, that's what the actual issue is here. And Cotton and Trump are pretending like it's rigged against them when everything that we've seen has shown that it's actually very much rigged in their favor and has been quite helpful to Trump, to Republicans, in order to muddy the waters and make sure that people don't understand what's true and what's not true.
There is no world in which things are rigged against conservatives, and Dan Bongino is the top shared news site on Facebook 20 times over.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Think of how much should be shared if it wasn't rigged against him.
Oh my God. He would be, I mean, I don't even know. I have no idea on how big Dan Bongino could really be. But that is a perfect example of Tom Cotton, like you say, taking a kernel of truth, twisting it to conservative aggrievement, which all roads lead back there.
They're the biggest victims ever.
And this is, on some level too, what it is like, look, these tech companies, they are massive. He is right. At the beginning of this thing, it was something that was done to protect these companies. We should have prevented them from getting this big and powerful. You could maintain that same protection on 230. And prevented them from doing all the things that have made them so large, like buying other companies, buying out competitors, tracking data in such a way that they become these behemoths, having ad sales, and basically bringing back the problems that existed why we had Sin Fin laws. this all can come back in some type of antitrust regime. I'm not convinced, frankly, that inhibiting algorithms in some fashion, right? Maybe you still want to provide some user experience, but in doing these deep digs on data on people isn't part of an antitrust regime. I mean, part of this is about regulating and cutting off different divisions of the company from itself so that they don't have the ability to trade this information. I mean, that one time in this country, up until the Clinton administration, you could not, and this was in TV as well, but it started out with movies. You could not own a movie studio and theater company because they didn't want a situation where it's like, I'm MGM and I'm making, whatever it is, bullets over Broadway and only putting it in these theaters. And we had that in television for a long time, where if I'm NBC Productions, I could not make my own TV shows. I would have to get those from a studio that was separate because we wanted the ability to have more companies and access to these outputs. Now we have cable, so they became less relevant in the context of TV. We did have a short period where the TV was garbage, but cable opened up the opportunities for people. But
I think, part of why we're not having as sophisticated of a conversation about this in Congress is like, there have been many instances that show how tech illiterate, like the very elderly Senate is and the very elderly House.
I wonder if I still have that.
Yeah, what is that clip? Was it Feinstein or somebody trying to understand, like...
Inhofe was saying that
the
internet is a series of tubes.
Yeah, right, or things like that. I mean, there's zero understanding of how algorithms work or how the internet functions. And, so I thought Warren's bill is a start there, but maybe we came to some perfect agreement there where it's not elimination of sharing algorithms and like this, but maybe a tweaking that limits their addictiveness or their potency.
Yeah, I think that's we'll see. Hopefully we'll be able to talk about that. I have a feeling we're going to be talking about that a lot because there's not going to be a whole lot that Joe Biden's going to be able to do, even if they get the Senate, because Joe Manchin will stop a lot of it. But antitrust is an area where we've talked to David Dane about this. We've done many interviews on antitrust, but the prospect specifically has outlined how you don't need legislation to fundamentally alter and go back to it was late Ted Stevens, right? Not Inhofe. It was Ted Stevens who said this series of tubes. You don't need new legislation to get back to the way that antitrust used to be in this country. Meanwhile, let's talk about the other big problem that people have in this country, of course, which is lesbians ruining Christmas. And how do I know that lesbians have ruined Christmas? Well, I heard it from the Pope of the Jews, Ben Shapiro.
In the end, conservatives are going to have to get into the business of actually making entertainment because the left has decided that all entertainment is now to be woke. All of it. Right? Even holiday programming is to be designed toward pleasing and placating left-wing critics. Right? For example, normal holiday fare tends to be pablum. Right? It tends to be the kind of stuff that is really not socially justice-oriented. It's sort of warms the cockles of your heart kind of stuff. So Hulu decided this year that they were going to make their holiday pitch.
Okay. Well, I thought we paused it.
Being rom-com. Now, listen, they can do whatever they want. Free country. Company can do what it wants. Typically, when you're talking about a religious holiday, which is what Christmas is, I mean, it is a secular holiday for many Americans, but it also happens to be a religious holiday. Typically, you celebrate that by, celebrating things that don't directly cut against a lot of religious sensibilities, but that's the direction Hulu has gone. And they've gone that direction so far that they have decided, the entertainment industry, that they have to go to places like Hallmark and then browbeat them into making pieces on lesbian and gay couples, even though the main constituency for Hallmark is largely religious families with small children. You know, that's their prerogative. All these are free companies; they can do what they want. But it means that conservatives
Positive
can
first.
and should build.
I just want to go over the things that the
Yes.
Ben Shapiro, the Pope of the Jews, as I call him, because he is deemed me and other Jews to not be real Jews.
Mm-hmm.
He is not only Pope of the Jews now, apparently, he's also Pope of the Christians, which I
He
thought
knows
was
what Christians
the actual.
want. Yeah.
He knows what like you don't generally. And according to him, apparently, Christmas is, like, maybe it is a more religious holiday. I'm not Christian. I have, I guess, attended at least a substantial amount of Christmases with my ex-in-laws. It was not terribly religious. It was more oriented towards drinking and presents. I don't know.
That's what my Christmas is like.
But Ben Shapiro is telling you that is not what it's supposed to be.
Right.
Ben Shapiro is also telling you that if something's on Hulu, it is fundamentally like changing the the landscape of holiday fare.
Right. So first of all, he talks about all Christmas movies as if they are confined to Hallmark. I'm someone who likes to watch Miracle on 34th Street, for example, or just like all other movies that are not just specifically designed for wine moms in Indiana. Like that's who he's speaking for right now.
I love the fact though, then he says,
and
he also happens to be the Pope of all greeting card businesses because he knows that Hallmark was browbeat into this. Now, it's not a
Hallmark movie. It's not a Hallmark movie. It's a Hulu movie with Kristen Stewart. That's what he's talking about. Hallmark has nothing to do with this.
They didn't produce it? What is he talking about?
I don't think they did. I mean, I'm going to look it up right now.
Let's assume that they did.
It's like a critically acclaimed movie that is on Hulu right now. It's definitely not a Melissa Joan Hart Hallmark movie with retreads and F-list stars.
How does Ben Shapiro know that Hallmark is browbeat? Like, does Ben Shapiro think that the Hallmark people, they don't operate in their own best financial interests? So he's in charge of the greeting card business and television production in terms of what is right and what is wrong. The Hallmark is clearly operating in its own, it's not its best interest, but it's just simply doing this for the sake of placating people who are apparently not even his customer base, according to him. If you make holiday movies, you cannot include lesbians because that is contrary, apparently, to the Pope of the Jews' understanding of Christianity. Which
he moonlights as a Christmas elf. So
there you go. So, I mean, I just want to get the tally going to see where he's going with this. Go ahead.
Alternatives. Again, I'm not even saying that it's terrible to make a movie about that's a lesbian rom-com. Make whatever you want. All I'm saying is that if you are a conservative with conservative sensibilities, at a certain point, you might get sick of the fact that Hollywood only wants to make the kinds of movies that you despise, right? And only wants to make the kind of movies that slap your sensibilities in the face and treat you like you're a fool. Again, that movie from Hulu apparently is, I haven't seen it yet, so I'm going by the reviews, which are, of course, 100% positive. The movie is all about how a conservative family learns that all of their religious values have been a bunch of crap for years, which is always exciting news.
Yeah,
it's a funny movie.
It's about, what it actually is about? It's about how it's hard for a lesbian woman to come home and bring her girlfriend there. They have to hide the fact that they're in love and pretend to be friends. And it's like kind of a fun little coming out story and also a heartwarming holiday movie. That's what it's about. Like, I mean, I know that conservatives pretend to be past the idea of, gay rights and stuff like that, but that's like genuinely really cruel and offensive to kind of say that story is slapping conservative sensibilities in the face when it's really supposed to be about love between, two people.
Well, it's slapping his conservative ones in the face. But this argument that conservatives need their own cultural, first off, they have it.
You have it. Then watch the Hallmark movies. Don't go on Hulu. Watch Hallmark.
I know people who have been in Mormon-produced movies. It exists. It's just, here's the thing. They're boring. People don't like them that much. Some of them, I'm sure, sell. But this whining on the right that has existed for years. And Shapiro's really on this because he came out of that Breitbart world, and this was Breitbart's problem. And it all stems from this small man, Andrew Breitbart's sense that his buddies in West LA, they were he wasn't part of the cool crowd.
Oh.
And Andrew Breitbart was so mad that the Hollywood people rejected him. And they did. They rejected him over and over again. It drove him crazy. You can look at tapes of him in front of college audiences bemoaning these people in Hollywood and resenting them because just because they would diss him when they would see him. And he was so angry about that. He developed his whole ideology around politics being downstream from culture. And that was what the essence of Breitbart. And Shapiro came out of this. Now, of course, Shapiro himself was a never was in terms of show business. Now, some people argue that I was a has-been, that I was a failed comedian. I got as much time out of that business as I wanted. But Shapiro never did.
Yeah.
He wrote his scripts and he never sold one. He never got any of that. And I can tell you from having an experience, I sold almost a dozen scripts to every network that existed. It's not that great. I think Ben should just move on from it, accept the fact that he can never, ever, ever taste that which always has escaped him. And
you mean pleasing his wife?
I was just getting, I don't know why that came into my mind as soon as I said that. But yes, I mean,
it's not
that
even
is
politics anymore. It's just culture. It's just a mythical culture that they try to push on their 17-year-old
But that is
audience.
their politics. That is exactly right. That is their politics.
No, it is. But like, you know what actually affects politics in terms of like the culture war that Republicans are trying to wage? The effective stuff is like what Law and Order or whatever Trump's talking about, like, or the hating immigrant stuff. Like, that's horrific in itself, but it's politically effective. What he's talking about, no one cares. No one actually cares. Nobody.
I miss the days where they had the American Family Institute or whatever it was, association, was saying that Shark's Tale was teaching people to be cross-dressers.
Oh, I remember Shark's Tale. Didn't they sing, working at the car wash?
I don't know. I didn't see that movie. I
saw it as a kid.
It was after my time. But I did interview somebody. Sort of interview. I did speak to them on the phone. I guess it was an interview where they told me that it was all about like Lenny the Shark was cross-dressing as a dolphin and stuff like that.
I didn't take that out of that as a child.
You probably did. You
Christina
just didn't,
Aguilera.
You probably did. You just didn't realize it.
Cool.
You probably did take that. Cudlow. Have you guys seen the trailer for the new Kevin Sorbo, Malcolm McDowell movie about a young Bernie Sanders rise to power? It's supposed to be a right-wing comedy where he swears a blood oath to Stalin as a young boy, and the movie includes AOC and HRC. It comes out Friday, but the trailer's up on YouTube if you want a good laugh.
That sounds amazing.
That
What's
sounds
it called?
actually pretty good.
Can I bookmark it? What is it?
There's no name.
Oh.
I guess they thought that he was going to be president, maybe, and they started going that. Defund Joe Manchin's butt. With the war on Christmas drawing near, have you considered recruiting Antifa super soldiers for battle? They're all 7'6", 400 pounds of rock-hard muscle due to the experimental super steroid they're on. You need them for this fight. Disco Stew. Swag is shitty weed. I don't get we're supposed to have sympathy for Republicans now on the receiving end of Trump's Klan. Angel. Matt, isn't swag shitty weed? Matt, swag is bad weed. Hugo. Swag is dirt weed. Swag is free stuff. Oh my God!
I've not heard that.
Wagon itchweed.
Yeah, that's not in the Midwest anyway.
Rabbit from Boston. The Michael Brooks tribute series last night had some amazing vibes. Would encourage the MR audience to check it out if you love Cornel West and Zizek. Nikki in Astoria, I hear Mark Maron say swag too. I read that. Swag really refers to low-grade weed, says LMO. Super happy I tuned into the MR etymology hour, says Tom Huppman. Salta, swag versus swag. Okay. Ryan Cole. Do small children watch Hallmark specials? Left Com Pelosi. Free Lunch Express. It's super anti-Semitic and just baseless. Oh, that's what the name of it is. Free Lunch Express. Oh my gosh. Wow. Should we play this?
I'm down.
Let's save it for Friday.
Let's save it for Friday. Quinn from Indianapolis. Maturity report with Sam the bra salesman. Thank you. Sean from NorCal. I just noticed the top half of Lou Dobbs' head is 25, but the bottom half is 72. And take it from an ex-pot dealer. Swag is crappy weed. Okay, sure app. I could glitch. Okay. Iced tea fur. The U.S. government also uses slave labor. Our VP-elect actually fought to make sure we could. Harvus, swag, stuff we all get. Unmute Kyle. I thought swag was swag because you could put swag around it. Makes you cool. But. Twitter pushes me towards content I like. It suggests people similar to you like. Yes, there you go. Not Mo. Potential energy. Whisk on the suspect swag. I don't know. I'm done with that. Calling from a 203 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
What's up, Sam? This is Matt.
Matt from
Connecticut.
Matt from Connecticut. What's on your mind, Matt?
Well, minor point of order, kick things off. It's actually pronounced Froud, like the Hobbit movie. And yesterday you said you were going to talk about...
Wait, it's called what? Wait, what?
Froud. It's not, you keep saying fraud. It's pronounced Froud.
Froud.
Yeah. The desolation of Froud. Anyway, are we going to get a stimulus? Is there like a relief? Are we going to feel relieved come Christmas?
Fraud. I'm not sure what you're talking about, but
fraud. You're mispronouncing. Yeah, it's Froud.
It's not Froud. What are you talking about?
Enough.
Is it?
I think it's a joke.
Okay, you're getting him. All right. Well, in terms of a stimulus, I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't know. Mitch McConnell is holding to his, $500 million plan. I don't know. It's really a question of like how much, I don't know. It's possible we'll get this Gang of Four one. It depends on how many Republicans they could swing over if they were going to actually pass it. But I don't know. Mitch McConnell will even bring that bill up to a vote. I don't know. But we're going to talk to Ryan Grimm on Monday about this and Biden's picks. So we'll get a better notion then. Appreciate the call. Froud. I don't get it. I really don't get it. Calling from a 541 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Art calling from San Diego.
Art from San Diego. What's on your mind?
I have a somewhat contrarian point to bounce off you guys and see if you have thoughts about it.
Okay.
And that is that probability of winning analysis as propagated by Nate Silver and Nate Cohn and John from San Antonio is, one, basically meaningless, and two, more bad than good for democracy. And the meaninglessness...
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, the meaninglessness, it can be seen in several ways. The most obvious one is that these kind of forecasts can never be wrong unless they say 0% and 100%. If they say Trump has a 1% chance of winning and then he wins,
right,
the forecast is
correct.
Or if he loses, it's still correct. Also, you can't judge them after the fact. So say one forecast says Biden has a 75% chance of winning. One says Biden has a 90% chance of winning. Say Biden wins. You can't tell that one or the other of those was actually correct or more accurate than the other. You see what I mean?
I agree with you. I mean,
and it's interesting.
It's it's a useless.
Yeah,
you're right. It's unprovable, right? I mean, unless Joe Biden was to run against Donald Trump 100 times or something, or I don't know, 50 or however many times. But if it's just a one-off, you can't really assess whether that number was correct in retrospect. It's just another. It's a marketing gimmick on some level. I mean, I think you can say that one thing is more likely than another, but to actually put a number on it. Look, I think the number is accurate if you really, really have a nuanced and subtle and developed understanding of statistics. And even then you would be like, but that doesn't really tell us anything, because, it's one thing to say, like, if we were to run this race 100 times, 75 of those times Joe Biden would win and 25 times Donald Trump would win. Okay. I mean, that may be the case, but in terms of like, it doesn't help, the body politic per se. I'm not convinced that it didn't depress votes though. Right. Like, this time around, I think it might have, in Clinton's case in 2016, it's not inconceivable to me that the idea that she was definitely going to win. I mean, we had somebody on this program, Sam Wang, I think it was, like a week before the election. Maybe it was a couple of days before the election, where he said 99% chance, I think. And I was like, all right. I mean, it's just that it turns out one time that day was 1 out of 100. I mean, I think it's probably, helpful from like a historical standpoint. In retrospect, it has more value than it does in looking forward, in my mind, because then it just tells you like, huh?
Does it have retrospective even information?
Yeah, I think it does.
Compared to a weather forecast.
I think it does.
Forecast.
Well,
okay.
let me ask you this. If I tell you there is a 10% chance of it raining tomorrow, and you go out and you're like, awesome. Right? There's a 10% chance. That's the day that I'm going to hold my wedding outdoors. No tent. And it rains and everybody gets wet. If I attended that wedding and my wedding's coming up and they say there's a 10% chance of rain, you know what I'm going to do? I'm probably going to say, like, at the very least, I want the tent on standby. Like, so in retrospect, I think it actually has value. It certainly did for me. I certainly wasn't as confident about this election as I would have been if I didn't think that Clinton had a 90% chance of winning in 2016.
Right. So that's right. A weather forecast, I want to contrast. It provides like useful information that you can act on. And maybe the forecast is wrong and you brought an umbrella, but without needing it. But it's useful information. Whereas about a forecast for a campaign, it's infotainment for political junkies is all it is, in my opinion.
I mean, I think that's probably true. I mean, I think there is, and part of what we do here is also that kind of infotainment. I mean, it is. I think that particular data point, you may be right. Although I think, like I say, after the fact, I think people understand what that data point means more, right? And so in retrospect, I think it has some actual like educational value. But again, it's more like after the fact, hard lesson to learn. But I agree with you that it's not necessarily actionable, although it could be in the right activists, hands. If you tell me there's this 50-50 chance of winning this election on Friday, I'm going to go out and I'm going to say to people, like, there's a 50-50 chance. Your vote's really important.
And what if they say it's an 80-20 chance? It's like, oh, okay.
Well, now I would say, hey, the last time I heard there was a 90% chance it was Donald Trump. So you got to get out there and vote anyways. I mean, it is.
Right. So it doesn't change. it doesn't change the behavior of somebody who thinks people should vote either way.
I mean, I think what you're saying is probably, I think there's some merit to it, but in the same way, it's like, okay, so.
Could I just make why I think it's bad for democracy? And maybe be interesting to hear John from San Antonio's views, because I've tried to get Nate Silver and Nate Cohn to engage, but I don't have a blue check.
Listen, if you get John from San Antonio to address this, believe me, that's a much better get than Silver or Cohn. Believe me.
Okay, well, my big problem with it is not, like you're saying, it could influence people's behavior, which could be bad or good, but it's worse in that it reflects this kind of technocratic population management view of the electorate, as opposed to citizens deciding who their leaders are going to be. Oh, it's like this natural phenomenon like the weather, the statistics. I mean, it's a dehumanizing population management view of the electorate that is bad for democracy, I would say.
I mean, I think there's something to be said about that.
Well, thanks for letting me get my rant off my chest. I appreciate Sam. I appreciate all you guys do. And even though might be infotainment, you guys provide actionable, educational stuff other than when John from San Antonio is giving it.
Well, I think you're, 75% right. Appreciate the call. Calling from a 407 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Don't worry, John from San Antonio, if you're listening. Don't listen to a single word that guy said. Calling from a 407. Hey, Who's this?
This is Andre from Florida.
Andre from Florida. What's on your mind?
First, I wanted to ask, can I use your answer to my question in a short documentary I'm doing?
Yes.
Okay. So, since Joe Biden said that he would veto Medicare for all if it were to miraculously come through the Senate, what are your opinions on the chances of getting some single-payer system through?
During Joe Biden's administration?
Yeah.
Oh, I would say, based upon what the Senate is configured as, even if they win in Louisiana, I would put it somewhere between 0% and 0% chance, single payer.
Wow. What do you think about the future after Joe Biden? Maybe if we get a progressive candidate? There are some, like David Pakman said, even if Bernie Sanders were president and there was a Democratic Senate, we're still not going to get Medicare for all.
If Bernie Sanders was president and we had a Democratic Senate that had, let's say it was a Democratic Senate by 2 votes, I would say no. Also, I would agree. I think we will have Medicare for all within 20 years.
That's a while.
Well, I don't know how old you are, but 20 years ago feels like it was yesterday for me. So,
well, I am 26, so.
I remember when I was just a little kid. I can tell you that, I know that seems like a long time, and it actually is, Truman proposed it in 1952. And the distance between Medicare, the establishment of Medicare itself, and the Affordable Care Act, which was the only sort of major healthcare reform, that was 50 years. I think this system that we have is largely unsustainable, and I think we need it's going to take a new generation of Democratic leaders before we get it. Yeah. I just think that's the case. There's just too much influence. I think what's going to happen is, I don't know if we're going to get. If we don't have a Democratic Senate, it's impossible. It's just impossible. 0% for any change whatsoever. Maybe you'll get some nibbling around the edges of the Affordable Care Act, but nothing in any way, even I wouldn't even almost call it incremental. If you were to get,
what do you think the issue is? Is it corporate donation, or
yes,
what's causing the reluctancy?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily corporate donation, because I think that a lot of these people get. I think it's big money and influence in that. I don't think it's just corporate donation. I think it's like the insurance companies also have the ability to spend money against a candidate where they're not necessarily donating to anybody. They're just, we're going to launch a $50 million campaign that's going to crash anybody's career. And, you know, like Sheldon Whitehouse said this to me once in an interview with him, where he's like, it's not just when people come in and offer you money. What they'll also sometimes do is come in and say, I'm about to spend this money against you. And so it's not even a question of like, I'm getting money from the insurance industry. It is the insurance industry is going to run a $10 million campaign in my state, and it's going to convince the voters to vote against me, as opposed to like necessarily contributing to somebody else. So it's not just donations, but it is it's corporate money. It's money. There are people making money off this stuff. That is the same reason why, you know, you can look at the conversation we had today with Stephen Wertheim about why do we have 750 bases around the world? Why do we have a series? And I can tell you, you'd say 20 years is a long time ago. In 1993, I was doing stand-up, and I had a bit. Wasn't funny, I can assure you, but it was about how it seems like we have a new world's greatest monster every 6 months. And I think I had this bit about it. It's like it's a small world, except for it's a just different ride with different, monsters who were threatening us. And I think, I was referencing Gaddafi in 93 about it, because George Herbert Walker Bush was pushing somebody new. Maybe it was 92 or 91, actually. Now I think about it. And then it was Saddam. And all of this stuff, there's so much money to be made in these industries that they will perpetuate they'll become self-licking ice cream cones. And so it's not just corporate donors, but it is money. At the end of the day, it's because there's money to be made by people. And then there's a whole host of other things that, like, we have a system that doesn't teach civics that much. And, but that's it. That's all I can tell you. But
well, thanks for taking my call.
Thanks. Appreciate the call.
Before I go, I want to say I've never heard the word swag in my life.
Well, dude, you're young. Get out there and live a little.
That's fair.
All right. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Good luck with that documentary. Send me a clip. Send me a link.
Absolutely.
All right. Appreciate it. Calling from a 225 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. This is Samantha from Louisiana.
Samantha from Louisiana. How are you, Samantha?
Hey, good. Hey, I just wanted to call. Nervous, sorry. Quick thank you.
Me too.
Thanks. For all you do, though, with this coronavirus. I bet you have saved, like, numerous lives with all the reporting that you all do, so I'm grateful for that.
Well, I don't know about that, but I appreciate it.
Well, I wanted to talk to you guys about actually kind of merging the whole Facebook and Ben Shapiro thing. Because I think, like, a lot of women my age, during the summer, we all got ad spammed with a person called Classically Abby. Have you guys heard of her?
I have not. But how old are you, may I ask?
I'm 35, so
okay.
around that.
All right, well, we're kind of, we're female millennials, so same.
Yeah.
Same demo.
Classically Abby is Ben Shapiro's sister.
Ah.
And she's just as bat crap crazy as he is. You guys should not check her out. But during the summer, we all got spammed. Like, if you listen to, like, people like you, TYT, Majority Report, all that kind of stuff. And my whole point with all of this is, like, how much of the popularity So like Ben Shapiro have, Dave Rubin, all these people on Facebook, how much popularity is bought?
A ton.
Or
a ton. There was one time where there was if I'm not mistaken, there was a time where Daily Caller's ad buy, somehow there was a public figure. I think it was the Daily Caller. Maybe it was Daily Wire. I can't remember. But they spend a tremendous amount of money on Facebook advertising. Like I'm talking like,
and they have the money,
6 or 7 figures.
They have the money that, like, you know, left-wing outlets don't have deep pocket donors who just want to fund and fund and fund so that they can indoctrinate young people to liking their ideas. Like, this is the reason they are so, you know, perpetuated on these sites is partly because of the algorithm, but partly because they have the means.
And understand that I'm not suggesting that classically Abby's posts were necessarily bought and promoted, but if you spend that kind of money on advertising, then it, in fact, you know, I've been planning for 3 or 4 years to do a YouTube buy. I just haven't quite got around to it yet, but I'm going to, and it's not going to be 6 or 7 figures. Probably closer to 3 or 4 figures, but if you spend that money, the idea is that you're getting subscribers or whatever it is, or you're laying the foundation, and then your content travels. So the classically Abby may not have been paid for and promoted, it might have been, but advertising pays off in this world. I mean, it just does. I mean, that's why they use it in political campaigns, and that's why we're going to unleash the Kraken.
Release the Kraken.
Oh, release the Kraken. Well, that's part of the problem, is I haven't quite figured out the dynamics of this yet.
Right.
But yes, without a doubt, there's no doubt in my mind that Ben Shapiro's outfit has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars minimum on this stuff. In fact, I'm not convinced that other YouTubers that we have talked about in the past, I don't want to say anything that could be considered in any way defamatory or slander, but there are people that we have talked about in the past who have worked with people who have worked at like Cambridge Analytica. And Cambridge Analytica is basically an optimizer of sorts. They are funded by the Mercers. That Mercer money has been sloshes around, both in terms of the way that you can game things. I mean, look.
The Mercers were intimately involved with the general election iteration of the Trump campaign, for everyone who, you know, doesn't remember.
The first one.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I meant.
Oh, yeah. And Rebecca Mercer was like living at the White House for the first year.
Robert Mercer was like, oh, I love Ted Cruz. Just kidding. I'm going to just.
Mercer also sank Zephyr Teachout in her race up in the Congressional. I think it was the 20th at the time, or the 19th.
Yeah, I read that book, Devil's Bargain, like about Steve Bannon, and Bannon was very, very involved with the Mercers and the money there. I know we're getting a little off track, but it just still sticks out in my mind, the Gatsby-like parties that the Mercers would have, where you'd have to dress up in some like sort of old costume, and it would be very themed, like almost kind of just the way, you know, I don't know, just rich people parties, and it's super creepy.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Right. Samantha.
So I'm kind of wondering why, or like how much interaction they're actually getting, like foot traffic and all that stuff is bought for and paid for.
Well, what I'm suggesting is that it's not necessarily that their traffic is bought. Like, they don't necessarily have bots, although I think that's possible. There's some of that, but it's scaffolded by paid content. In other words, like, you know, you build the foundation. So let me put it this way. If you gave me $500,000 to do an ad campaign on Facebook and YouTube, I can tell you in a year, my numbers would be huge, even if that ad buy had ended, because I would have accumulated more viewers. You know, it's like, you know, that's just the bottom line. You don't need to be, you just need to be good. You don't need to be great to get those numbers if you have that type of capital.
It's the push of the snowball down the hill, right? So
that's
Hey, real quick before I let you guys go, here's my prediction for y'all that Donald Trump is going to try to run in 2024, and he is going to try to do it as an independent. because I think that eventually the Republicans are going to reject him. I just kind of wanted to get your input on that. And like, what do you think it would do with the Republican Party? I'll let you go. I appreciate it, you guys.
Appreciate the call, Samantha.
Bye.
You did a good job. There was no need for nervousness. Teacher Lauren just tells me that Teach Out ran in the 19th. I couldn't remember if that district was the 19th or the 20th when she ran, because that
that's
changed.
the one by like in Orange County up there.
No, it's in Columbia County. Columbia County.
What?
Yep. And Dutchess, Columbia and Dutchess.
Who ran in the?
But wait, but Samantha's last question. I do not think Trump could run as an independent, but I don't think if he does, it's not going to be because the Republicans reject him. Sarah Palin is being featured at the Young Republican Gala in New York. I think they can only have 50 people there, and she'll probably be beamed in by video. But they can't quit him. Let's put it that way.
They wish they knew how, but they can't.
They cannot quit him.
I wish I knew how to quit you.
All right, let's take a final phone call of the day. 209 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello.
Oh, yes. Hello, Sam. I'm Daniel from California.
Daniel from California. What is on your mind?
So I don't mean to be a shill, but I am a member of your program, and I would recommend it.
Congratulations.
Who paid you to say that? Oh, it was me. It was me. I forgot.
He who should not be named, David Packman, did pay me to pay you as an apology for the sex deal.
All right. Appreciate that. Thank you, David.
Yeah, well, anyways, this is like a month or two late, and there's probably not much time left. But I agree with you, Sam, that I agree with the goals of the defund the police movement. I just don't agree with the slogan. And, this is anecdotal, but my friend is a police officer, and I have a friend whose husband is a police officer, and they heard that defund the police slogan, and they think it means abolish the police. It's like, I know it's hard because some of these movements start online, and there's no way for us to plan sometimes, but we do lose.
I don't think that's what happened here. I mean, I don't know. I think you finish your point, I guess.
Oh, no. I mean, like, I guess that was my point, that like people think defund means abolish, and
I think for some people, it does, but I think and I don't know how you would measure this, but I think for most of the people, it does not mean that. But I don't know. I really don't know how to assess that. But I think for some people, it does. I mean, look. Again, it's sort of like the weather. It was funny. Obama supposedly talked about this in the. Do we have that clip? We do have that clip, right? I don't know. I don't know if we should play it, because on some level, it's like the argument that has been made about it. Well, first of all, I agree that if I was in charge of making the slogan, I would have made it a different slogan. But I'm not in charge of the slogan. I can tell you that there are pilot programs in 4 major cities across the country where New York, LA, San Francisco, 1 or 2 others at least, where they're at the very least, starting to train like EMTs to deal with folks with mental issues as opposed to sending cops out. I don't know if the people who started that defund the police did it because they wanted to help Democratic politicians. I think they did it because they wanted to reform policing. And it's hard to argue with the results based upon where we were. As a political matter, I think it is, it's not what I would choose, but I don't think that's what the point was for it. So the real incumbent, the responsibility lies with the politicians, because like I've said, it's like, I don't like that it's raining out, but I'm not going to sit there and stand out in the rain and go like, ugh, I wish it wasn't raining. Yeah. No, I'm going to get an umbrella, or I'm going to figure out, I'm going to get a raincoat, or I'm going to figure out like, hey, I'm not going to walk to work today. I'm going to get to work in a different way. Like, as a political matter, you know, it's hard to argue that it hasn't brought reform, because it has. And you know, in terms of like Democratic politicians running, it's incumbent upon them to have their own criminal justice reform thing and say, if they want to get up there and say, like, I don't agree with defund the police, I agree with Sam Seder's calculation of unburden the police and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's what they should do, or they should come up with their own. And so, yeah, I think that, you know, it's going to turn off some people as a slogan, but, you know, I don't know what slogans don't.
But objectively speaking, if we're talking about electoral liabilities, Nancy Pelosi herself as leader does way more, is way more of an electoral liability than any slogan is. And I think that's the, like, we need to, when we have these conversations repetitively, we need to understand what conversations we're not having. Because I
agree. And it's also like, with, you know, with all due respect to your friends, like, I don't know if I would go and, you know, like, I would assume cops, even cops who are in favor of like unburdening themselves of some of their responsibilities, they're not going to be the first people that you're going to have to convince anyways. So like, I guess I would agree with you in the same way that I prefer a sunny day to a rainy day, although there are days where you need a rain, you know, to grow stuff. But in general, if I'm walking to work, but as a political matter, it's incumbent upon the politicians to deal with that. And you know, another good way of dealing with it is like, hey, why don't we do this before someone has to start a movement with a slogan that we don't like? That way, there won't be a need for a movement with a slogan that we don't like. But I appreciate the call. I get your point, and I agree as like a, you know, from a marketing standpoint. I agree, but as a political matter, it's like it's incumbent upon politicians to deal with this stuff and propose it in a different way. It hasn't inhibited some of the biggest cities in the country from making changes. And those changes, those pilot programs, they're going to have data. And they're going to be, and that data, I would believe, is going to be used to leverage changes. So if, you know, the point of defund the police was not to help Democrats get elected. It was to change the way policing happens in this country. And Democrats, and even the politicians who are implementing it, they just need to figure out how to work with that energy and explain it to people who otherwise just hear that. I mean, you can't. Look, AOC has more name recognition amongst conservatives than she does on the left.
Yeah. We
can't control that. You know, we can't control the fact that Fox uses her in that way. We can't control the fact, and I don't, you know, I wouldn't suggest that Nancy Pelosi should not be the Speaker of the House because she is so toxic in elections. If she is, I'm not convinced she is. I'm not necessarily, but certainly as a talking point, San Francisco Nancy Pelosi has been a problem. If you think that a slogan is problematic and sloganeering is problematic in elections, she's been a problem there. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but I think it's incumbent upon politicians who are running to sort of like see what's out there, get a sense if they feel like this is a liability and there's a misunderstanding, then you got to go out there and you got to present something. You know, I have no doubt that maybe there were some Democrats who were susceptible to attacks like this, but that is a function of the Democrats deciding to run on not being Donald Trump. Yeah. And that is a very hard thing to pivot off of if you're not running against Donald Trump.
Which is what we saw down ballot all throughout.
All right, that's it for our phone calls, ladies and gentlemen. But we will let's go to the IMs. Where the heck is that? Emma's getting tired.
Oh, sorry. I should have got the large coffee today.
No, believe me, I understand.
I was like, I'm going to be responsible.
All right, we're going to race through. We're going to do 10 of these. Sam's Sweater Daddy. Defund the police is a bad slogan is the new version of I want Medicare for all too. But I don't agree with that. I think it's just like people are looking for a reason why the Democrats underperformed their expectations. And I think that is they're using that as a way of doing it because people aspire to power. Yeah. And if I can undercut one wing of the party, I'm going to increase my power. And that's why they're doing it.
Justify my, my own way of participating in politics. Like,
but I would also say that complaining that there is a version of this of the left that is also, I think, disempowering in the same way. It's like, stop complaining about like the disingenuousness of people who are competing with you for power.
Yes.
And just exercise what little power you have.
Yeah, don't wait for them to give you a fair fight.
Exactly. Like that's what drives me crazy. Like this whole like even like the complaints of like Neera Tanden has been so toxic to people on the left. Yeah, okay. So what? I mean, it's honestly like, so what? Like, this is not about, we're not in second grade. It's not like, Jenny's so mean and this and that. Like, of course Jenny's mean because Jenny wants to win, wants the gold star over Betty. Like, let's Betty get into a fight for the gold star.
Kids fight each other in kindergarten.
Exactly.
Rip each other's eyes out.
Yeah, maybe that wasn't necessarily the best. That wasn't necessarily the best analogy. But Sean, is there a leftist book club Discord? I know the TMBS crew posted a book list, but I don't know anybody in the groups to read with. Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah,
we should have done that around like we should around like the I don't know. 800 or maybe 1,500 authors that we've had on this show probably for the past 10 years.
I believe there's a Goodreads page of all the authors we have on the Majority Report that is maintained by fans of the show.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it's Jonathan Armstead. And but we should set up a Discord so that we can have like talks around that. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. 3 more. Chatty Stevens. The fraud is subject to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. You can either measure the position of the fraud or the speed of the fraud, but not at the same time. I believe the series of tubes with Ted Stevens, indeed. Really cool. Hugo Chavez plus Elvis still alive equals Trump. And the final IM of the day. As an internet marketer at the beginning of the Google AdWords and paid search, these platforms became hybrids. In 2013, when Facebook's ads, which were ineffective, and smartphones and social media organically encouraged native searching and shopping through our phones. It's all the devil spawn of antitrust and zero regulation of tech. Good comment. Appreciated. See you folks tomorrow. Emma, we'll see you on Friday.
Yes, I'm moving, so I won't be here. Bye.
Bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught.